Hello, my name is Nikit. I am a trans man and I welcome you to this new episode of Tea Talks powered by Transgender India today. An amazing guest is joining us today, so please welcome Aritra Chatterjee. Welcome, Aritra.
Hello. Thank you to Transgender India for creating this platform for these conversations, which I feel are absolutely essential in pushing the discourse forward towards affirmative healthcare. And just a bit of introduction about myself before we sort of dive into the topics that we are going to discuss. So, I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I work primarily with the intersections of mental health and gender sexuality. And I'm also a woman of trans experience. So I sort of have some sort of lived experience into the spectrum, but definitely not all of it. But having heard narratives from people across the spectrum and working with them actively has sort of opened me up to multiple realities that people actually come across in the spectrum. And I think I'm learning with every passing day. So, yeah, I'm a perpetual learner also in that regard.
That is very wonderful to hear about Aritra. Thank you very much for telling us about you and thank you very much for the work that you are doing for the community. So, Aritra, we have a long list of questions that people from the community have asked for. So, shall we dive right into them?
Yes, sure.
Alrighty, great. So, the first question that I've got right here is Hello, I am a trans person who has run away from home. Running away from home at an early age has left me with a lot of trauma. How to forget it and move on in my life?
So when I, look at this question, I feel often when we have a lot of baggage from the past, uh, our immediate response is to try to snub it. But what happens is the more we try to forcibly forget, the more it rises to the surface. And at times, that becomes like a vicious loop where we are trying to suppress it and then it is again resurfacing. So I think rather than trying to erase whatever happened. It is probably, like I would say it is, I would not say it's better, but I would say it's certainly, much more efficient probably to acknowledge that whatever has happened is there, that my trauma is valid, that whatever I've experienced is not okay, but nonetheless, I have experienced it and I accept it, but I also give myself the compassion to know that I deserve better. And that is exactly where I think adding self compassion comes in, where, like compassionate exercises like gratitude, for instance, where I list down things in my life that I'm currently grateful about. I add supportive people to my life who validate me and make me feel good about myself. And as I keep adding these things to my life, I add more community, I add more support, I add more gratitude, I add more acts of euphoria because I'm sure that as trans people, most of us struggle with dysphoria to some extent or the other. And therefore, to find those touch points that, give me joy, to find queer trans joy, and to imbibe that into my life effectively on a day to day basis. And when I do this, I think I do not have just my trauma, but I've also added much more to my life to give me validation and to let me thrive. I think instead of trying to erase the trauma altogether, if we keep adding, then the trauma becomes more bearable. And then maybe with the help of a licensed professional, you can actually process your trauma and effectively work through it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
That was really insightful. Thank you very much for that. I'm pretty sure this will would definitely help a lot of people. And your response was really wonderful. I actually have quite a lot of more questions, along the same lines as to what you were saying. So shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Right. So the next question that we've got from a wonderful person is how to navigate through staying with a toxic family who doesn't accept your gender identity and battle dysphoria at the same time. Are there any coping mechanisms for this?
Correct. So I think in the Indian context and maybe across the globe, if we see that the anti-trans discourse is sort of rising, and in most cases, families are not conducive to the thriving of trans persons within the familial environments. Many families who still come around are mostly tolerant, but not really accepting. But I think it's very important to remember one thing, and this I'm taking from popular culture because I think there's a lot of powerful popular culture that speaks to me as I also work with mental health. That I'm sure you must know about this series called Pose. So in Pose, there is this lead character called Electra, and Electra happens to be a trans woman who's homeless on the streets doing survival sex work, and she kind of says a very powerful thing about acceptance. She says that I do not give you the power to accept me. You have to respect me, and I take that power away from you. So the fact that my existence is valid in itself and that my family or anyone for that matter does not have to validate it for me to exist is something that I think should be internalized. It's a process. It is not like I said this right now and it just happens magically from within. So the self work needs to happen. And there are resources to go about it. But I think that is one of the trajectories to think about. Also, I think that in the familial circumstances that we have, particularly in the Indian context and in many South Asian cultures, is that we live in very tightly knit familial systems where there is very less privacy, there is lack of interpersonal boundaries, and therefore to take delight in drawing these boundaries and communicating these boundaries. Now, this is once again a tight slope because often that incites violence from the family. So whatever I'm saying is not like a one size fit all approach. It has to be tailored to individual contexts. But I still feel that as queer people, since we have stayed for the longest time with our families, we know what their ways of responding are, and we know our contexts best. I think first we need to believe that we know our context best and we are already the experts of our own lives because we have survived this far, right? So if a person has survived this far, it is good to tap into that inner wisdom to sort of see what has helped me survive. And I think that will feed into the question on coping mechanisms, where my coping mechanisms are not probably coming like handed down from someone else, but they are within me. Say I find solace when I go for hiking, or I find solace when I go for community meets, or I find solace when I just lock up my room and I express myself in my own ways. Even I've even heard people who kind of take time out during the night when the family members are asleep, and then they probably have their moments of euphoria. Now, I honestly feel that I come from a place where I think that this is not how it should be. This is not ideal, but we live in straitened circumstances, and it's good to acknowledge that even while giving solutions. So I think that trust your inner wisdom, trust your processes, and see what works for you, what gives you joy, and find community and find support. Because I think that if we look at the family as the standalone structure that is going to help us navigate, I think then we are very mistaken, because the family is primarily a cishet patriarchal structure. It's heavily socially conditioned, and most likely they are not. They're also the products of the same society that, in fact, makes you feel dysphoric. So they can only go as far. it is very important to find alternative spaces in the terms of friendships, kinship, support networks, which can validate you and which can, actively provide that space for you to explore and cope with such a situation. But boundaries, very important. Even keeping some resources, like if you're facing violence, knowing lawyers to take that up, knowing the context of police personnel to engage in, NGOs to engage in, I think is very important.
Thank you very much for that response. I honestly relate to a lot of the things that you just said. Being, being, spending the night time to just, feel euphoric. So yeah, I absolutely relate to that. So thank you very much for that. It absolutely makes sense. Everything should be, I guess, tailored to individual experiences. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to the next question, shall we?
Yes, sure.
Alrighty. So the next question that we've got is, okay, a really wonderful one. How can I navigate and process the emotions associated with my gender identity journey and the challenges I've faced?
Yeah. So when I talk about the challenges and emotions associated with gender identity, I would once again want to remind that these challenges are happening in an exclusionary society. The primary challenges that we face are because of the fact that we do not see trans people around us thriving. We grow up largely seeing cisgender models of gender experience. So we see cisgender parents, mostly cisgender heterosexual parents, operating in cisgender ways, handing down toys of a particular gender to a particular sex, not knowing that they essentially are not linked together. क्योंकि ऐसा होता है, एंड आई विल स्पीक ऑल्सो अ बिट इन हिंदी फॉर द ऑडियंस टू कनेक्ट मोर, कि समझो घर में तुमको देखा जा रहा है मेल की तरह, तो इट इज अनलाइकली दैट दे विल हैंड डाउन अ बारबी टू यू, बिकॉज उनका माइंडसेट में ऐसा है कि अगर हम ऐसा करेंगे तो फेमिनिन हो जाएगा बच्चा, और अगर फीमेल असाइंड है तो उसको फुटबॉल देंगे तो मैस्क्यूलिन हो जाएगा, सोसाइटी के एक्सपेक्टेशंस की तरह नहीं होएगा. And therefore, I do not want that, because I want the child to become cisgender. And I think trans community का जो अंदर में जो इमोशनल चैलेंजेस है वो प्राइमरीली इस बात से आता है कि उन वो लोग ऐसे फैमिलियल एनवायरनमेंट्स में ग्रो अप करते हैं जहाँ पर उनको कैसे टेंड करना है, ये उनके पेरेंट्स या फिर स्कूल का इकोसिस्टम या फिर जो भी सराउंडिंग कॉन्टेक्स्ट है एक बच्चे का, वो नहीं जानते कैसे टेंड करना है. उनका जो थिंकिंग है दैट्स अ जेंडर स्टीरियोटाइप्ड सिसजेंडर वे ऑफ थिंकिंग और स्ट्रीमलाइन थिंकिंग है. उसके लिए क्या होता है, चाइल्डहुड से डिसोनेंस होता है कि अगर आप देखेंगे मोस्ट नैरेटिव्स में ऐसा आता है कि एट अ सेंस ऑफ एलियनेशन, एक सेंस ऑफ एलियनेशन, डिस्कनेक्ट विद that I'm, because most people when they speak about their experiences they describe themselves as feeling alienated and isolated and feeling different, right? So and whenever we feel strong emotions, जब हमको कोई strong भाव आता है ना हम में, तो हम चाहते उससे like to run away, से escape करना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि वो हमारे सिस्टम को अनरेस्ट में डाल देता है. लेकिन अ गुड थिंग टू रिमेंबर अबाउट इमोशंस कि उनको उनके साथ कोप करने की मैकेनिज्म उनके अंदर ही है. आप इमोशन से भाग नहीं सकते, क्योंकि जितना भागोगे उतना वो आपके पीछे भागेगा. सो द वे टू इमोशंस इज थ्रू देम, एंड देयरफॉर अगर आप ये कोशिश करेंगे कि कैसे मैं इस इमोशन के साथ बैठ सकता हूँ, क्योंकि इमोशन सिर्फ बॉडीली एक रिएक्शन या रिस्पॉन्स है जो कुछ समय बाद इट अगेन फॉल्स डाउन, वो एक अराउजल स्टेट है. लेकिन अगर हम ये जाने कि कैसे उसको रेगुलेट करना है, कैसे उस मोमेंट को टॉलरेट करना है, तो ये भी देखेंगे कि उसके बाद जब वो चला गया हम फिर से ऑपरेट कर सकते हैं, लेकिन हम इतना डर जाते हैं इमोशंस से कि हम उनसे भागना चाहते हैं. तो इसलिए ये ज़रूरी है. और मैं हर समय बताऊंगी ट्रांस जॉय के बारे में या क्वियर जॉय के बारे में, क्योंकि ये हमें ज़्यादा डिस्कोर्स में नहीं दिखाई देती, जहाँ पर हर एक्सपीरियंसेस में डिस्फोरिया, डिस्ट्रेस, डिसफंक्शन यही आती है, तो क्या आपको जॉय देती है, क्या आपको खुशी देती है, ये जानना और उसको एक्टिवली सीख करिए। तो मुझे लगता है अगर वो आप सीख करेंगे ना, तो जेंडर आइडेंटिटी में भी आप अफर्म्ड फील करोगे।
Wonderful. So the next question that we have is actually, very similar to the answer that you've just given us, and it's seeking more options or more ideas as to how can one person pursue healthy relationships. So let me read the next question for you. The next question goes: how can I work towards establishing healthy relationships and connections with others who understand and support my transgender journey?
हाँ, तो इसमें एक चीज़ जो मैं बताना चाहूँगी कि वैसे अब क्या एक डिफ़िकल्टी होता है कि जब हम ऐसे रिलेशनशिप सीक करते हैं विदिन अ ट्रांस कॉन्टेक्स्ट, हमको ये नहीं पता चलता कि कौन-सा पर्सन या फिर कौन-सा दोस्त सेफ होता है। स्कूल में तो ये बड़ा दिक्कत होता है, क्योंकि अगर हम किसी से भी कॉन्फिडेंस के साथ जाए किसी के पास और वो बात करे, ऑफ़न ऐसा हुआ है कि दैट पर्सन हैज़ कट द पर्सन ऑफ, या फिर ऐसा हुआ है कि वो खुद ही बेचारा नहीं जानता वो दूसरा बच्चा कि कैसे उससे डील करे, या फिर वो ऐसा सोचता है कि अगर मैं इस पर्सन के साथ रहूँ तो फिर स्कूल का जो दूसरे बच्चे वो मुझे भी बुली करेंगे, क्योंकि दिस चाइल्ड इज ऑलरेडी द आउटकास्ट, ऐसा होता है। तो इसमें क्या है कि चिल्ड्रन के बारे में तो मैं कोई सलाह भी नहीं दे रही, लेकिन क्योंकि आई थिंक इन आवर कॉन्टेक्स्ट आई रियली फील सॉरी टू से दिस, दैट trans children and like their lives and the way trans adolescents function is still in a deplorable state. And therefore, right now, the kind of advice I'll give is mostly to adults who have a bit of agency in their lives. So उसमें ऐसा है कि हेल्दी कनेक्शंस आप ट्राइड एंड टेस्टेड ही कुछ सीख करो, जैसे कि कोई एनजीओ ऐसा है जो इस एरिया में काम करता है, ये इसको एक्टिवली सीक आउट करो। अभी इंटरनेट के जरिया से हमको बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन एट द फिंगर टिप्स पता चल जाता है। मुझे लगता है ये इसका सही उपयोग करिए आप, और जानिए कि कहाँ पर है वो एनजीओ, कौन सा पीयर सपोर्ट ग्रुप है आपके सिटी में, कनेक्ट कीजिए। और जितना दोस्त आप बनाएंगे कम्युनिटी में, आप उनका सपोर्ट भी खुद के सपोर्ट के साथ करेंगे, क्योंकि उसका भी कोई इंडिपेंडेंट सपोर्ट होगा या फिर उसका भी कोई और दोस्त होगा, एंड ऐसे करके एक नेटवर्क बनता है। So I think that is a good way to optimize support. और इसमें भी ऐसा है कि ऐसा नहीं है कि अगर कोई और व्यक्ति ट्रांस है तो फिर उसके साथ ही आपका हेल्दी रिलेशनशिप बनेगा, क्योंकि कोई ट्रांस पर्सन भी ऐसा हो सकता है कि वो भी अब्यूसिव है, उससे भी आपका वायलेशन हो रहा है, ऐसा हो सकता है। लेकिन फिर अगर हेल्दी रिलेशनशिप्स की बात की जाए तो उसमें ये भी देखना पड़ेगा कि आप उसमें सेफ फील कर रहे हो या नहीं। अगर आप नहीं सेफ फील कर रहे हो, अगर आपका बॉडी ऐसा सिग्नल दे रहा है कि उसके साथ आप डिस्ट्रेस फील कर रहे हो, अराउजल फील कर रहे हो, या फिर आपको ठीक नहीं लग रहा, तो बॉडी को सुनिए, जानिए क्यों ऐसा लग रहा है, और उन जिनके साथ लगता है सेफ उनको एक्टिवली सीख कीजिए। I think that is very necessary. And, like, because I feel that unless we are connected, the connection sort of has, made our community come this further, because networking के बिना, connections के बिना, solidarity के बिना ये movement इतना आगे नहीं बढ़ती कहीं पर भी across the globe. So I think that doing that is very important. और खुद का एक close फ्रेंड ग्रुप भी रखिए, कि लार्जर कम्युनिटी तो है, लेकिन खुद का एक क्लोज फ्रेंड ग्रुप, उसमें सिसेट पीपल भी रह सकते हैं, क्योंकि बहुत सारे ऐसे सिसेट पीपल हैं जो बहुत ओपन माइंडेड है, जो बहुत इजी गोइंग है, अच्छे से आपके साथ रहेंगे, तो उनको चुन लीजिए लाइफ में, क्योंकि ये आपका बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट किस्सा है लाइफ का। माइंडफुल रहिए इन लोगों के बारे में, इनको चूज कर लीजिए और इनसे लेके एक सर्कल ऑफ सपोर्ट खुद के लिए बना के रखिए, क्योंकि ये आपको टाइम टू टाइम काम में आएगा।
Absolutely. So, Aritra, I absolutely agree. A support system, like, a close knit group of friends is definitely a lot, really important. Although community to hai, but, wo jo small group of friends jo rehte hain, having that is very
comfortable.
essential. Absolutely, absolutely. I really agree with that. And looking at the next question, we've already talked about, uh, having those close knit of friends, and, also having a community of people to support you. The next question is, has more to do with self love.
Mhm.
So let me ask you the next question. The next question goes: what role does self compassion and self love play in healing from past traumas related to my gender identity, and how can I cultivate it?
Yeah, so I would like to mention something about trauma in trans context. Um, I think that हमारे लिए ट्रांस इंडिविजुअल्स के लिए ट्रॉमा ऐसा नहीं है कि एक सिंगल ट्रॉमेटिक इंसिडेंट हुआ और ट्रॉमा बन गया. ट्रॉमा इज ए कॉम्प्लेक्स क्योंकि बहुत सारे सोर्सेज से आपको ट्रॉमा मिल रही है, स्कूल से मिल रही है, कॉलेज से मिल रही है, वर्क प्लेस से मिल रही है, फैमिली में मिल रही है. तो जो भी लार्जर सोशल कॉन्टेक्स्ट है वहाँ से भी आपको ट्रॉमा मिल रहा है किसी ना किसी तरीके से, इन मोस्ट केसेस. और ट्रॉमा क्रॉनिक भी है. ऐसा नहीं है कि लाइफ में एक बार ट्रॉमा मिला और ट्रॉमा खत्म हो गया. ट्रॉमा आता जाता है एंड अक्रॉस द लाइफ स्पैन कंटिन्यू करता है. इसलिए कॉम्प्लेक्स और क्रॉनिक ट्रॉमा कुछ ऐसे कारण भी है जो हमारे कंट्रोल में नहीं है. शायद ऐसे देखिए कि स्टेट पॉलिसीज ऐसे है कि उसके कारण हेल्थ केयर इम्पैक्टेड है, उसके कारण स्कूल इम्पैक्टेड है, वर्क प्लेस में ठीक से पॉलिसीज नहीं है. तो इसमें अगर आप खुद के पास खुद के साथ नहीं रहेंगे तो ये जंग लड़ना और भी मुश्किल हो जाएगा. लेकिन जब खुद के शरीर और मन में इतना कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो, उसमें सेल्फ लव कल्टीवेट कर पाना भी डिफिकल्ट है. ये भी आई थिंक इज इम्पॉर्टेंट टू मेंशन कि इजी नहीं है कि मेरी खुद की जो बॉडी है उसमें आई एम नॉट फीलिंग कंफर्टेबल, आई एम कॉन्स्टेंटली feeling distressed, या फिर I am in a society which does not see me the way I see myself and I'm feeling distressed, and therefore to practice self love. मगर एक टेक्निक जो काम करता है, अगर मानो खुद के जगह आप कोई फ्रेंड को यहाँ पर बैठाए कि उसका ये कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, तो आप उसको क्या सलाह देंगे, और जो सलाह आप उसको देंगे वो सलाह अगर आप खुद को दे, तो आई थिंक दैट बिकम्स एन इम्पॉर्टेंट मैकेनिज्म टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ टू एक्सटेंड दैट काइंडनेस टू योरसेल्फ. Or maybe you can even consider that if you were a loving parent and this child was in your context, what would you have done for the child? And usse, after you have written it out or journaled about it, you can think, इससे क्या मैं खुद के लिए कर सकता हूँ? And I think that these slowly these exercises, if you engage in, or self-compassion, letter writing, journaling का बहुत सारा apps, internet में बहुत सारा exercises है. If you want, I can also share the links of some of these platforms because I think self-help resources are really good. हर समय therapy सबके लिए accessible नहीं होता है, affordable नहीं होता है, therapists हर समय available नहीं रह सकते हैं. और उसमें भी एक बात है कि trans informed therapists का number भी बहुत ही drastically कम है हमारे इंडियन हेल्थ केयर सिस्टम में. तो इसमें ये है कि अगर सेल्फ हेल्प रिसोर्सेज मुझे पता है तो खुद के साथ भी मैं एक डायलॉग में एंटर कर सकता हूँ उस रिसोर्सेज के जरिए. एंड ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है मुझे लगता है. और एक चीज़ जो मैं बताना चाहती थी कि सेल्फ लव का एक और रूट है कि खुद के हॉबीज़ या इंटरेस्ट के साथ कनेक्टेड रहना और उसको पूरा मन लगा के करना. अगर मुझे डांस पसंद है तो एक टाइम है जब मैं नाचती हूँ और मन लगा के नाचती हूँ. अगर एक समय ऐसा है कि उसमें मुझे लिखना पसंद है, उस समय मैं सिर्फ लिखती हूँ कोई डिस्ट्रैक्शन के बिना. अगर मुझे बर्ड वॉचिंग पसंद है तो कहीं मैं लेक में चली जाती हूँ या चला जाता हूँ और सिर्फ बर्ड्स को देखती हूँ क्योंकि उस मोमेंट में आई फील मोस्ट एट पीस. आई थिंक ये अवेयरनेस अगर हमको रहे ना कि क्या हमको खुशी देती है, देन इट्स वेरी इजी टू रिफ्लेक्ट एंड ऐड दिस. क्योंकि ऐसा नहीं है कि हैप्पीनेस एक मैजिक पिल है, एक समय आपके लाइफ में सिर्फ आ गया. उसमें भी एफर्ट देना पड़ता है टू ब्रिंग दोज हैप्पीनेस मोमेंट्स इनटू योर लाइफ. और मुझे ऐसे एक्टिविटीज प्लान करना है खुद के लिए ताकि रोज वो हो सके मेरे लिए. कुछ ही समय के लिए शायद हो, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता हर समय कि 1 घंटे के लिए 2 घंटे के लिए, इतना टाइम शायद ना मिले. लेकिन कुछ ही समय के लिए खुद को जो पसंद है, खुद के साथ टाइम बिताना बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है।
All right. I actually agree because you know, जो आपने कहा कि आप अगर आपके फ्रेंड को बोल सकते हो, राइट? बिकॉज आई थिंक नाउअडेज सिचुएशन ऐसा हो गया है कि नाउअडेज खुद के लिए एम्पैथी या जो लव रहता है वो उतना गहरा नहीं रहता है, बिकॉज पीपल आर जस्ट सो बिजी सर्वाइविंग. सो व्हेन यू हैव अ फ्रेंड, कोई फ्रेंड है आपका जो जिससे आप बहुत क्लोज हो, अगर आप उनके लिए वो सेम लव फील कर सकते हो, then of course you should also be taking the time out to love yourself just
हाँ,
as much,
एंड
right?
ये ऐसा भी नहीं करना है कि आपको सोचना नहीं है, ये एक एक्टिविटी की तरह ही करना है कि पेन और पेपर लीजिए और क्या बोलेंगे वो लिख लीजिए, क्योंकि क्या होता है सोच में हम सोच में ही अटक जाते हैं, वहाँ से सॉल्यूशन नहीं निकलता। तो ये एक्टिविटी कीजिएगा कि एक लेटर एक्चुअली आप लिखिए और फिर वो लेटर खुद को यू रीड इट टू योरसेल्फ एंड सी इट। उसका फीलिंग ही अलग होता है अगर आप करेंगे ये एक्सरसाइज।
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. जो next question है हमारा, this is a little similar to what we are already discussing. So the next question goes: are there any mindfulness or grounding exercises that can help me manage anxiety or stress related to my transgender experience?
हाँ, तो एक तो बात है कि ट्रांसजेंडर एक्सपीरियंस का स्पेसिफिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट होता है, बहुत सारा स्पेसिफिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट होता है और ये जो टेक्निक्स है ये बहुत जनरल है। तो इसमें एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है क्योंकि मैं ये बोल सकती हूँ कि आप डीप ब्रीदिंग कर लो, आप ये माइंडफुली कर लो, वो माइंडफुली कर लो, लेकिन इसमें भी एक क्या बोलते हैं वो स्किज़म गैप ऐसा आ जाता है क्योंकि आपका कॉन्टेक्स्ट बहुत स्पेसिफिक है। तो
Right.
उसमें अगर मैं कुछ चीज़ रेकमेंड करूँ, आई थिंक एक मैं ऐसे रेकमेंड करूँगी कि कोई एक अफर्मिंग एक्टिविटी आप खुद के लिए चुनिए। वो कुछ भी हो सकता है, वो ये भी हो सकता है कि आप बाथरूम के प्राइवेसी में खुद को मिरर में देख के अप्रिशिएट करेंगे और खुद को बोलेंगे कि आई एम ब्यूटीफुल। ये भी हो सकता है, लेकिन उस मोमेंट में आप डूब जाएंगे विदाउट डिस्ट्रैक्शंस। दैट इज इम्पॉर्टेंट। कुछ भी जो आपको अफर्म करता है वो कुछ भी हो सकता है। वो ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि एक हेयर कट का एक्सपीरियंस समझो, आपके पास वो हेयर स्टाइल बहुत अफर्मिंग है, तो आप जब जाएंगे ना बार्बर के पास, वो फोन टोन सब बैग में रखकर फुल एक्सपीरियंस का मजा ले। आई थिंक दैट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, क्योंकि माइंडफुलनेस ग्राउंडिंग ग्राउंडिंग का बहुत टेक्निक्स मिल जाएगा इंटरनेट में, आई नो, मगर दिस इज इम्पॉर्टेंट कि कैसे जो मुझको अफर्म करता है, और ये रेगुलर किसी चीज को ढूंढना है जो मुझे रेगुलरली अफर्म करता है। ये ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि आई हैव अ पार्टनर हु इज वेरी अफर्मिंग एंड conversations with that partner is affirming. So आप डेली ये कोशिश कीजिए कि आपका कुछ टाइम बना रहे पार्टनर के लिए जहाँ पर आप अफर्म फील कर सकें, क्योंकि आपको डिजर्व करते हैं। पहले आपको वो बिलीव करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि आई डिजर्व लव, काइंडनेस, अफर्मेशन, एंड टू वीव दैट इनटू योर डेली रूटीन। क्योंकि ऐसा नहीं कि एक बार किया, कुछ ग्रैंडियोज यूफोरिया का काम कर लिया, जीडी लेटर ले लिया, कोर्ट से एफिडेविट ले लिया और हो गया। ऐसा नहीं है, डेली करना है ताकि डेली वो डोपामीन, एंडोर्फिन, सेरोटोनिन, जो हमारे हैप्पी हार्मोन से ऑक्सीटोसिन, उसका रिलीज डेली आपके सिस्टम में हो।
राइट. एंड आई ऑल्सो बिलीव, मतलब ये है भी सब लोग के लिए यूनिक, राइट? बिकॉज सबकी एंजाइटी और सबकी स्ट्रेस तो ऑफ कोर्स सेम तो
डिफरेंट
नहीं
है,
रहेगी.
हाँ, इसलिए जब मैं ये बात भी कर रही हूँ, आई विल ऑलवेज कीप सेइंग दैट दिस इज नॉट अ वन साइज फिट ऑल थिंग, एंड प्लीज रिमेंबर दैट यू आर द एक्सपर्ट ऑफ योर ओन लाइफ। सो tap into your own wisdom, what helps you, what gives you joy, and माइंडफुलनेस अगर मैं एक्सप्लेन भी थोड़ा कर दूँ, व्हाट इज माइंडफुलनेस, क्योंकि ये एक टेक्निकल टर्म भी है और आई थिंक इट्स गुड इफ आई एक्सप्लेन वंस। सो माइंडफुलनेस ये है कि किसी एक हम हमारा ऐसा होता है कि लाइफ में अभी और मे बी शायद इन द पास्ट फ्यू डिकेड्स वी लिव अ वेरी फास्ट फॉरवर्ड लाइफ, राइट, कि हम मोमेंट्स में नहीं जीते, एक समय हम यहाँ पर भी क्वेश्चन आया कि पास्ट ट्रॉमा कैसे डील करें, फ्यूचर के वरीज कैसे डील करें, लेकिन पास्ट और फ्यूचर में हर समय स्विंग करते करते हम प्रेजेंट को नहीं देखते कि अभी हम है, अभी हम एग्जिस्ट कर रहे हैं, अभी क्या है, इस मोमेंट में क्या है, इसमें अटेंशन लाना, इस मोमेंट को रिकॉग्नाइज करना, उससे अवेयर होना और उसमें जीना, ये प्रैक्टिस माइंडफुलनेस। ये बहुत सिंपल हो सकती है कि जब मैं ब्रेकफास्ट खा रही हूँ, आई ट्राई टू फील व्हाट फूड आई एम हैविंग, यू नो, आई ट्राई टू savor its taste, its smell, its texture, and I make eating a very wholesome experience. और मैं इसलिए यूफोरिया को इसके साथ जोड़ी क्योंकि that way it can become a very therapeutic experience, because this can even be a meal with your partner, जिसको अगर आप माइंडफुली करें तो आपका पूरा दिन शायद अच्छा जाए उस एक मील के जो प्लेजेंटनेस है उससे। और ग्रैटिट्यूड जर्नलिंग मुझे लगता है बहुत अच्छा एक प्रैक्टिस है कि जब आप सोने जाए या फिर जब आप उठे, आप दो चीज, सिर्फ दो या एक चीज रिकॉर्ड करना कि जिसके लिए उस दिन ये चीज अच्छा गया। इस फीलिंग से अगर हम सोए तो उसमें भी एक प्लेजेंट स्टेट आता है हमको, जो हमारे स्लीप को फैसिलिटेट करता है, इन जनरल वेलबींग को फैसिलिटेट करता है।
Yes, absolutely. So अब दे जैसे अभी आपने बोला था, past and future. So of course, we most of the times we forget about the present. But I have a question right here that because trans people के लिए definitely past experiences do end up affecting in the present, especially they end up affecting in the present, right? So the question that I have for you next is how can I set realistic goals for my future that are not hindered by past traumatic experiences?
या सो ये टॉक जब मैं शुरू की, मैं एक बात बताई कि माई ट्रॉमा इज देयर, बट माई ट्रॉमा इज नॉट एवरीथिंग अबाउट मी, आई एम मोर देन इट। ये जो है, इससे मैं एक पॉसिबिलिटी भी क्रिएट कर रही हूँ खुद के लिए। Now, it is a thing that, even in terms of time, if we see, past हो चुका है, अभी उस पर हमारा कंट्रोल नहीं है। फ्यूचर आने वाला है, उसमें भी हमारा कंट्रोल नहीं है। लेकिन प्रेजेंट के साथ पास्ट रिलेटेड है, क्योंकि प्रेजेंट में पास्ट की याद आ रही है, और पास्ट को कैसे प्रोसेस करती हूँ इससे ये निर्भर करता है कि फ्यूचर कैसे होएगा। तो present is the tying point both to the past as well as the future. And therefore, if I acknowledge what is at present, if I acknowledge that, I have past trauma which I need to work on and seek help, वो खुद ही एक अच्छा स्टेप है पास्ट ट्रॉमा के साथ डील करने में। और इफ आई एक्नॉलेज कि हाँ ठीक है, पास्ट ट्रॉमा है, लेकिन पास्ट ट्रॉमा के लिए ऐसा नहीं करना है कि प्रेजेंट को अनलिवेबल कर देना है। प्रेजेंट में मैं क्या कर सकती हूँ टू एक्सपीरियंस दैट जॉय, प्रेजेंट में मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ टू एक्सपीरियंस यूफोरिया, अभी क्या कर सकते हैं, अभी क्या मेरे कंट्रोल में है। एंड दिस ओरिएंटेशन आई थिंक ऑलवेज हेल्प्स यू to make a better present. And if you have a better present, a better future flows out of it. उसमें हम बहुत क्लियर हेडेड लेवल से डिसीशंस ले सकते हैं, मीनिंगफुली रिलेशनशिप्स में पार्टिसिपेट कर सकते हैं। और ये जैसे मैं बोल रही हूँ, ये मैजिक से नहीं होता है, इसमें सपोर्ट लग सकता है, लेकिन करना है। थोड़ा थोड़ा जो सेल्फ हेल्प प्रोसेसेस है, मैं उसके बारे में भी बोल रही हूँ, क्योंकि माई इंटेंशन हियर इज नॉट जस्ट टू से कि फॉर एवरीथिंग यू जस्ट गो टू अ प्रोफेशनल। व्हाट कैन यू डू फॉर योर सेल्फ? These gratitude exercises that I'm talking about, this you can do for yourself. The kind of affirmation and mindfulness का जो combination में बताई, that you can do for yourself. How can you add euphoric moments to your life? How can you show up for yourself better? शायद ऐसा हो रहा है कि आपको कोई repeatedly misgender कर रहा है और आप कुछ बोल नहीं पा रहे, तो खुद के लिए एक स्टेप आप लेकर ही देखिए कि उसको कामली बोलिए कि आई डू नॉट गो बाय दिस, यूज दिस फॉर मी। ये खुद के लिए आप स्टेप भी जब लेंगे ना, तो वो भी ऐसा लगेगा कि आप खुद के पास खुद खड़े हो रहे हैं। और इससे वो हो सकता है कि वो पर्सन फिर भी रेस्पेक्ट नहीं करता आपका वो स्टेप को, लेकिन वो आप पे नहीं है, आपने अपना काम कर दिया है। तब आपको ये डिसाइड करना है, इज इट वर्थ कीपिंग इन टच विथ दिस पर्सन? एंड इवन एज आई से दिस, देयर आर कॉन्स्ट्रेंट्स। सपोज ये पर्सन आपका मैनेजर है, आपको जॉब रखना है, तो उसमें क्या करना है, आपको वेंटिंग स्पेस क्रिएट करना है कम्युनिटी में, जहां पर आप खुद के जो फ्रस्ट्रेशन है वो बता सके, ताकि वो आपके हेड में एक क्लाउड की तरह हर समय वे ना करे। आपको ये भी सोचना है कि आप अलोन नहीं है, आपके साथ और भी इंडिविजुअल्स है जो मिसजेंडरिंग फेस करते हैं, जो डेड नेमिंग फेस करते हैं, और ये कोई भी जस्टिफाइड नहीं है, लेकिन फेस करते हैं, वो कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऐसे है। और सब मिलकर अगर रेजिस्ट करेंगे पॉलिसी लेवल में, क्योंकि बहुत सारे एंगेजमेंट्स होते हैं, ऐसा हुआ कि इंडिविजुअली मैं नहीं कर पाई कहीं पर, लेकिन अगर मैं ऐसे कोई प्रोजेक्ट में खुद को इन्वॉल्व की जहां पर वर्क प्लेस डिस्क्रिमिनेशन एड्रेस हो रहा है, वो भी एक जरिया हो सकता है खुद के ट्रॉमा के साथ डील करने का, कि आई एम एक्टिवली मेकिंग इट बेटर ऑन अ लार्जर स्केल। तो डाइवर्सिफाई करिए थिंकिंग को, और कैसे आप सिस्टम को भी बेटर कर सके उसके बारे में सोचिए।
Wonderful. I absolutely agree because taking that step, वो एक जो स्टेप रहता है ना, किसी को बोलना कि मेरे ये प्रोनाउंस नहीं है, मेरे ये प्रोनाउंस है, प्लीज ये यूज कीजिए, इवन दैट experience is very empowering because I also as a professional, every single day मुझे खुद को दूसरे लोगों को बताना पड़ता है, whether it is security people या अगर मॉल में कोई एंटर कर रहा है तो ऑफ कोर्स मैं जेंट्स की लाइन में जाता हूँ, तो ऑफ कोर्स आई गेट इट, लोग एक अलग नजरिए से
नजरिए
देखते हैं
से देखते हैं, हाँ।
आपको। या
ये
एग्जैक्टली,
होता
सो
है, और
यस।
अगर एक एक समय आप नहीं भी कर पाए, शायद ऐसा हो कि आप नहीं कर पाए क्योंकि इसमें भी थकावट है, राइट? कि हर समय आपको ऐसा करना, वो भी एग्जॉस्टिंग हो सकता है। तभी खुद के लिए वो काइंडनेस एक्सटेंड कीजिए कि आपका कम्युनिटी आपको आपके तरीके से देखता है, आपका आइडेंटिटी वैलिड है। सिसेट लोगों के वैलिडेशन से सब कुछ निर्भर नहीं कर सकता। तो ये भी माइंड में रखिए कि वो लोग भी अपने प्रेजुडिस से ही ऑपरेट कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि उसने मॉडल ही नहीं देखा है। उसने देखा है ऐसे ही वर्ल्ड है, उसने यही सोच लिया लिमिट्स है वर्ल्ड का, उसके बारे में कुछ है ही नहीं उसके अलावा, ऐसे सोच लिया।
जी, एब्सोल्युटली। सो जो नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन है हमारे पास, दिस इज अबाउट फाइंडिंग मोर resources and support networks. So the question that we have is, what resources and support networks are available to help me on my journey towards healing and self discovery?
I think that the fact that we are having a talk on this platform already establishes that this platform in itself is a resource, because I think Transgender India has a lot of resources, right from legal transitional requirements to medical transitioning to, very nuanced. And I absolutely love the fact that it is very nuanced. It is not like very thick and undetailed. So I think this resource is there, or like I'm saying, in individual capacities, in every city almost there are NGOs, CBOs. Now, if I talk about very rural areas, वहाँ पर एक problem है कि वहाँ पर activism शायद उतना strong नहीं है, या फिर वहाँ पर prejudice और भी ज़्यादा है, इसके लिए things are difficult, I know, and I empathize with that. I think it's also our drawback that we have not been able to reach to rural areas as much. मगर मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ, उसमें भी the internet, if you have access to it, is a good resource. या फिर even, like find community within your rural area, like उसमें ऐसा नहीं है कि आपका जो टर्मिनोलॉजी है उसमें ही आपको लोग मिले, लेकिन शायद हो सकता है कि कॉन्फिडेंस में कोई आपको कुछ बताया, या फिर उसमें भी कोई लाइक ऐसा हुआ कि कोई फ्रेंड ऐसा मिले जो आपके पास रहना चाहता है डिस्पाइट नॉट बीइंग लाइक यू, तो उसको भी सपोर्ट की तरह ट्रीट कीजिए, क्योंकि ऐसा हो सकता है कि आपकी तरफ कोई शायद ओपनली ना मिले रूरल एरिया में, तो वहां पर कम्युनिटीज को ऐसे भी सेंसिटाइज कर सकते हैं कि एक फ्रेंड है जो मेरे सपोर्ट में है, तो उसको एक मीन्स के तरह यूज करके कैसे मैं कोई और फ्रेंड्स को भी सेंसिटाइज कर सकती हूँ या कर सकता हूँ। And that eventually opens up to a circle of individuals who are maybe not sharing the identity with you, बट हु अंडरस्टैंड एंड वांट टू होल्ड यू, उसमें भी सपोर्ट मिलता है। क्योंकि ऐसा है कि लोअर सोशियो इकोनॉमिक स्ट्रेटा में या फिर रूरल एरियाज में उन लोगों को इतना पता नहीं है कि एलजीबीटी क्या है, लेकिन वो बेसिक रिगार्ड कि हाँ मेरा बच्चा ऐसा है, उसको ये पसंद है एंड आई एम ओके विद दैट। तो उसका ऐसा भी होता है कि रिचुअल करके शादी भी हो रहा है, वो लोग खुद के बीच रिचुअल्स भी एक्सटेंड कर रह रहे हैं, ऐसा भी है। ऐसा मैंने बहुत स्टोरीज इंटरनेट पे भी देखा है। तो उस स्टोरीज को अगर आप सीक आउट कर सके, और ये आप खुद के ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की तरफ से भी कर सकते हैं वहाँ का एक्सपीरियंसेस, एंड देन डूइंग आउटरीच प्रोग्राम्स आई थिंक इज ऑल्सो an important thing for in-person NGOs, which sort of work on the ground to reach out to the grassroots. I know many organizations which sort of reach out to grassroots level community as well, and tries to mobilize them. So these were some of my thoughts around this, कि रिसोर्सेज को ऐसे पुल कर सकते हैं। और बहुत लिस्ट इंटरनेट में भी तो है ही। इंटरनेट के बारे में मैं खुद ज़्यादा नहीं बताई क्योंकि वो बहुत जेन्युइन एक मीन्स ऑफ थिंकिंग भी है कि इंटरनेट में आई क्लिक एंड आई गेट ऑल द रिसोर्सेज, बट आई पर्टिकुलरली वांटेड टू हाईलाइट दीज चैलेंजेस बिकॉज दीज आर नॉट टॉक्ड अबाउट, कि जहाँ पर इतना डिजिटल एक्सेस नहीं है वहाँ पर कैसे करना है। तो वहाँ पर choose 1-2 persons in your pivotal life space who sort of are more neutral, who sort of, कभी ऐसा भी मिल सकता है कि more neutral है, कोई strong stance नहीं है लेकिन anti भी नहीं है, तो उसको ही खुद के सपोर्ट में ले ले एज एन अलाई। क्योंकि हमको स्ट्रैटेजाइज तो करना है जहां पर भी हम रहे। आई थिंक क्वियर ट्रांस लाइफ इज ऑल्सो अबाउट स्ट्रैटेजाइजिंग, एंड अगर आप गुड स्ट्रैटेजाइजिंग करोगे तो कुछ ना कुछ बेनिफिट उससे मिलेगा। ऐसा नहीं बोल रही कि सब प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व हो जाएगा, क्योंकि वो बहुत अनरियलिस्टिक एक्सपेक्टेशन है। क्योंकि ये भी ध्यान में रखिए कि सब प्रॉब्लम्स आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं है। स्टेट लेवल पॉलिसीज आर नॉट इन योर कंट्रोल, सोसाइटल प्रेजुडिस इज नॉट इन योर कंट्रोल, इट इज ऑल्सो नॉट योर रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी। एक पूरा सिस्टम को चेंज करना आपका रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी नहीं है, लेकिन खुद के लिए एक सपोर्ट सिस्टम बिल्ड करना जो आपके लाइफ को लिवेबल कर दे, जो आपके लिए यूफोरिया ले आए, ये आपके कंट्रोल में है, वो आप कीजिए। और उसका भी लिमिट्स है, उसमें भी सब शायद आपके कंट्रोल में नहीं रहेगा, लेकिन इफ यू हैव दीज एलिमेंट्स एटलीस्ट आई थिंक यू विल फाइंड होप। And hope is a very beautiful thing to have, because without hope it is very difficult to even carry yourself forward into the future, as we are saying. So maybe cultivate hope in the present.
Those are some really wonderful words. Kudos to that. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. So जो next question है हमारा, जो next question है हमारे पास यहाँ पे, goes, how can I accept myself as a transgender person? And how can I address any internalized shame or negative beliefs I may have about myself and my transgender identity?
This is a very important question. इसमें एक बात ऐसा भी है कि जब हम एक आइडेंटिटी के बारे में सोचते हैं, हम उसको एक फर्निश्ड स्टैचू की तरह देखना चाहते हैं जो बहुत कंसोलिडेटेड और कंपोज्ड। और जब हम आइडेंटिटीज़ को फ्लरिश करते भी देखते हैं, क्योंकि यूजुअली हमारा एक्सेस रोल मॉडल्स के साथ होता है कि शायद कोई ट्रांस एक्ट्रेस, कोई ट्रांस डॉक्टर, कोई इतना बड़ा, वो लोग ही इंटरनेट में ज़्यादा आते हैं, फीचर ज़्यादा होते हैं, उनके लाइफ का एक ग्लोरियस पिक्चर हमारे पास रहता है। लेकिन उससे क्या होता है, उनका जो कंट्रडिक्शंस, उनका जो स्ट्रगल्स, वो इतना हाईलाइटेड नहीं होता, और उससे उस नैरेटिव्स का ह्यूमननेस जो है वो चला जाता है। तो अगर आप खुद के अंदर देखोगे कि ये जो शेम है, ये शेम कहाँ से आती है। एक तो है कि ये शेम वैलिड है, मुझे वो शेम को देखकर ही ऐसा नहीं करना है कि आई हैव शेम टुवर्ड्स माई सेल्फ एंड आई शुड थ्रो शेम अवे, क्योंकि वहीं से आप जब इमोशन को दबा देना चाहोगे, शेम विल अगेन राइज अप। सो फर्स्ट आई थिंक इट्स गुड टू एक्नॉलेज कि हाँ मुझे शेम है। जब मैं एक्नॉलेज कर पा रहा हूँ कि मुझे शेम है, तो आई कैन एक्सप्लोर कि क्या चिंता आती है मुझे खुद के बारे में, क्या डर रहता है। और अगर इस चिंता या डर को वर्बलाइज करने की प्रोसेस में हम एंटर कर पाए, तो इट बिकम्स मोर इंटेलिजिबल टू अस। then I think we can also work with those thoughts. Often that requires professional help. लेकिन आई एम नॉट गोइंग इन टू दैट डोमेन, क्योंकि मैं ऐसा नहीं बोलना चाहती कि जहां पर भी आप स्टक हो जाओ प्रोफेशनल के पास चले जाओ. इसलिए एन ऑल्टरनेटिव वे विच वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट ऑल थ्रू आउट इट्स थ्रू सेल्फ कंपैशन. कि अगर एक फ्रेंड ऐसा था जिसका ये शेम है, उसको क्या बोलते, कैसे उसके लिए प्रेजेंट होते, और वैसे कैसे खुद के लिए प्रेजेंट हो सकते हैं, क्या कर सकते हैं खुद खुद के लिए. जर्नल भी कर सकते हैं कि क्या शेम होता है, और अगर शेम है तो क्या कर सकते हैं जो मुझे अच्छा फील करा रहा है. शेम तो एक ऐसा इमोशन है जिससे अच्छा नहीं फील होता. शेम शेम की तरह है, लेकिन अच्छा क्या आ सकता है, क्या कुछ अच्छाइयाँ है. क्योंकि ये जो रोल मॉडल्स है, ये जो खुद के सोसाइटी में प्लेस बना रहे हैं, ये तो है कि हम ये भी जानते हैं कि हमारा मूवमेंट भी प्रोग्रेस हुआ है. उसके बारे में बहुत सारा डिस्कोर्स अब होता है जो एक समय नहीं होता था. लॉज आ रहे हैं, रिकॉग्निशन आ रहे हैं. आई एम नॉट सेइंग एवरीथिंग इज वेरी पिक्चर परफेक्ट, बट वी आर प्रोग्रेसिंग इन अ सर्टेन वे. तो और ये भी सोच सकते हैं कि ये जो शेम है ये क्या दे रही है मुझे, पॉजिटिव कुछ आ रहा है इससे, नेगेटिव क्या क्या आ रही है. और अगर पॉजिटिव पॉजिटिव शायद कुछ कम ही मिलता है शेम से, तो आई थिंक इट इज, बट इट इज गुड टू रिफ्लेक्ट. क्योंकि उससे ना जब हम वर्बलाइज करते हैं, पेपर में बैठते हैं, लिखते हैं, हमारे थॉट्स जब पेपर में आता है उनसे एक स्पेस क्रिएट होता है, डिस्टेंस क्रिएट होता है, तब हम जान पाते हैं अच्छा ऐसा हो रहा है, शेम हमको ऐसा फील कर रहा है, ये आउटकम हो रहा है. और ये आउटकम तो मुझे प्रेजेंट में जीने नहीं दे रहा, प्रेजेंट को बर्बाद कर दे रहा है. And then, how can I make present more meaningful? क्योंकि एक बात याद रखना है कि ट्रांसजेंडर आइडेंटिटी एक बीमारी नहीं है, ये कोई फैड लाइफस्टाइल चॉइस कुछ ऐसा नहीं है. क्योंकि जिस लाइफ में अक्रॉस द ग्लोब इतना डिफिकल्टीज है, हम ह्यूमन बीइंग्स हर समय कंफर्ट ढूंढते हैं, ब्रेन भी कंफर्ट ढूंढता है. इसलिए किसी को देखकर हम इमीडिएटली लेबल करना चाहते हैं कि ये लड़का है, ये लड़की है, ये है, स्कैन हो गया, एल्गोरिदम बन गया ब्रेन में. हमारा ब्रेन बिल्कुल एफर्ट नहीं एक्सटेंड करना चाहता. तो ये जब आपका इंटरनल इवोल्यूशनरी मैकेनिज्म है, उसमें भी अगर आप आप नहीं कर पा रहे कुछ और, तो वही आपका एक इम्पॉर्टेंट मैसेज है खुद खुद के सिस्टम से कि आप ये हो. एंड आई थिंक कम्युनिटी सपोर्ट इज वेरी important. If you are struggling with it, please reach out. And do not keep it to yourself, but reach out to safe people. Do not reach out, and most often I think in this case you can also reach out to transphobic family members, because they can reinforce your shame, and that becomes a negative cycle कि मैं खुद believe करती हूँ I need to be shamed, and इसलिए I'm seeking out. Why I'm saying these things out loud? Because a lot of people will resonate. I cannot provide all solutions here, मगर if I lay down these trajectories of conversation, I think people will think, and that is all we need to do. Start thinking. And once we think, we become aware. I think we also start brainstorming solutions.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And although, the first step should always be, having that thought yourself. सबसे पहले, वो आपके अंदर जागना चाहिए, तभी जाके, you will be able to go out and do everything else. So, and also, a lot of times, outside resources like help will not be accessible everywhere that you are. So yeah, absolutely, having that come from within, I think it's very
And therefore
important.
that third person perspective really helps. कि आप जब खुद से डिस्टेंस लेके किसी दोस्त के बारे में सोच रहे हैं, किसी लव्ड वन के बारे में सोच रहे हैं, खुद को किसी के और के शूज में दे के खुद का पर्सपेक्टिव दे रहे हैं कि आपका शायद बच्चा, आपका फ्रेंड, आपका फैमिली का मेंबर, आपका कोई एम्प्लॉय या फिर कलीग ऐसा फेस कर रहा है, तो उसको क्या सलाह देंगे, एंड फिर टर्निंग दैट एडवाइस टू योरसेल्फ. उसमें क्या आता है, हमारे जो कंपैशनेट सेल्फ है वो बाहर आता है. क्योंकि हमारे कल्चर में ही ये है, खुद को सैक्रिफाइस करते रहो, you do not have any compassion for yourself, keep sacrificing and keep bearing with whatever is happening. तो उससे डिफिकल्ट है पहले से ही सेल्फ लव जंप स्टार्ट करना, इसलिए दिस थर्ड पर्सन पर्सपेक्टिव हेल्प्स.
Absolutely, I agree. जो next question है हमारे पास, that is also, it's about, how can I bring about that thought, that thought of empowerment, right? So the question goes, what steps can I take to foster a sense of empowerment and agency in my life moving forward?
Once again, not giving out like step, क्योंकि ये
Yes.
individual context, individual situations पे depend करेगा.
Yes.
Magar, I think one thing that I would want to say is to appreciate small things, small wins. Often we are so targeted on very large, grandiose aims.
The big
कि
picture.
पूरा complete transition, पूरा complete acceptance, पूरा complete integration, that we forget the small things. The kind words that maybe a friend said to us, that it will be okay, a family member checking on us कि ठीक हो अभी तो कैसा चल रहा है तुम्हारा, या फिर one of the parents wanting to ask me if I want to buy a binder, या फिर ऐसा कि एक दोस्त मेरे लिए झुमका खरीद के लाया, and that is affirming to me. So to consider these small moments, and I think often we forget that. So empowerment lies in these small things, to take note of these and to be grateful for them. Because I think that when you do that, you do not focus on what I don't have, but you focus on what I have and making the most of what I have to get closer to what I want to have.
Absolutely. And also to add more to what what you just said, even small moments, they end up making a big picture.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And to,
yeah,
to, to
absolutely.
sort of reflect, कि एक टाइम में ऐसा था जब मैं ये करने के लिए तड़पती थी, कि शायद अफर्मेटिवली ड्रेस करने के लिए तड़पती थी या तड़पता था, अभी कर पा रही हूँ या कर पा रहा हूँ, इसलिए ऐसा लगता है कि ये तो हो गया है, लीगल पेपर्स चेंज नहीं हुए, उसके बारे में सोचना है. लेकिन ये भी जो हुआ है, तुम्हारा पास्ट सेल्फ इसके लिए तरसता था, एंड राइट नाउ यू आर लिविंग इट. So enjoy that moment, because you have earned it. You have did it for yourself. Yeah. So which is why I'm saying, these processes feed into each other. And I think the more we do it, practice makes things not perfect, but close to perfection. And they make things uh, appear in your life in abundance. The more gratefulness that you practice, the more you take count of these moments. तो जब एक gloomy moment आएगा ना, तो अगर आप सोचोगे खुद के जर्नल को, अगर आप देखोगे, तो आपको इतने सारे स्मॉल 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 चीजें आपके पास laid out रहेगा. I think that is a beautiful moment then to go through all of that and see that, look how far I've come. And these are things I've witnessed.
Right, absolutely. जैसे ही आपने बोला था, there are so many things that you can do, journaling, maybe standing in front of the mirror and, talking to yourself, affirming your worth. So I agree, all of these, small things definitely make up for a bigger picture. So yes. Shall we move on to the next questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So the next question that we've got is, how can I develop a healthier relationship with my body and address any body dysphoria resulting from past traumas?
So one thing is, when I'm talking about dysphoria and trauma, one of the prominent and very saddening realities of many trans individuals is sexual abuse. And a lot of individuals have faced it. It is a pertinent concern across the community, be it for AMAB, assigned male at birth, or assigned female at birth. दोनों के लिए ही है कि and intersex individuals के लिए भी I'm sure है. उन पे डेटा नहीं है, वो भी हमारा शॉर्टकमिंग है, लेकिन है तो जरूर. तो ये खुद को जानना बहुत जरूरी है कि the responsibility of that harm lies with the perpetrator. वो उसका रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है, उसने वायलेट किया है. मेरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी नहीं है. आई थिंक दैट इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू इंटरनलाइज. एंड ये भी एक दिन में नहीं होएगा, लेकिन it is important. It is often good to connect with stories of fellow survivors and to see how, they have made peace with it. और एक ऐसा भी है कि बॉडी का जो डिस्फोरिया, ये डिस्कनेक्टेडनेस से भी होता है कि असाइन सेक्स के साथ में जो जेंडर्ड एक्सपीरियंस है वो मैच नहीं करता, बॉडी के कुछ पार्ट डिस्फोरिया देते हैं. लेकिन ये भी जानना है कि बॉडी को वैनिश तो नहीं कर सकते. प्रेजेंट जो बॉडी है वो ही वेहिकल है टू अ फ्यूचर बॉडी. इसके लिए प्रेजेंट बॉडी को कैसे अच्छा रखना है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. प्रेजेंट बॉडी अगर बाइंडर से खुश रहे तो बाइंडर खरीदो. अगर बाइंडर खरीदने की पैसा ना है तो सेव करो बाइंडर के लिए. प्रेजेंट बॉडी के लिए अगर ब्रा अफॉर्मिंग है, अगर स्टफिंग अफॉर्मिंग है तो करो स्टफिंग. See how you can make the present beautiful, because you cannot jump start to the future. जब हॉर्मोन्स लेना है हॉर्मोन्स लो, जब सर्जरीज करवाना है करवाओ, वो तो ट्रेजेक्टरी एक है ही. लेकिन ये इम्पॉर्टेंट है कि इस बॉडी को प्यार करना है, क्योंकि हम अगर खुद के बॉडी के साथ वो छेड़छाड़ कर दे, हाँ ऐसा सोचे कि बॉडी के साथ ही ब्रेकअप कर दे, सोच लिया कि वो उससे उसको केयर करना बंद कर दे, वो बॉडी विल नॉट मेक इट टू द सर्जरी टेबल, क्योंकि उसमें कॉम्प्लिकेशंस आ जाएगा, कोमॉर्बिडिटीज आ जाएगा. इसलिए खुद के लिए, खुद के फ्यूचर अफर्मेशन के लिए, खुद का जो विजन है उसके तरफ प्रोग्रेस करने के लिए प्रेजेंट में बॉडी को लव करना जरूरी है. And I think that sort of encompasses my thoughts around it. And ये बहुत छोटा छोटा चीज हो सकता है, ऐसा नहीं है कि बहुत बड़ा ही चीज हो सकता है. आप बाइंडिंग के भी ऑल्टरनेटिव्स देख सकते हैं. व्हाट आर लो कॉस्ट ऑल्टरनेटिव्स ऑफ डूइंग दैट? इट कैन बी लेयर्ड क्लोथिंग ऑल्सो फॉर अ लॉट ऑफ ट्रांस वेल. For a lot of trans women, it can be different things like, using gap panties, using tapping in a different way. तो उसमें बहुत सारा इंफॉर्मेशन नेट में है. अगर आपको हेल्प चाहिए, आई एम श्योर यू कैन टेक हेल्प फ्रॉम सीनियर्स ऑल्सो. इसलिए कम्युनिटी में सीनियर्स की भी बहुत ज़रूरत है कि उस लोगों ने पार कर चुके हैं कुछ स्टेप्स ट्रांजिशन में, तो जो आगे आगे वैसे एक जर्नी ऐसा नहीं होता कि आगे पीछे, लेकिन फिर भी जो जहाँ मैं जाना चाहता हूँ उसमें जो मेरे से थोड़ा आगे है, कैसे I can, benefit from their experiences and reaching out. I'm sure they would love to extend that advice to you, because I think that's another wonderful thing of our community, that we form kinship networks and alternative chosen families within ourselves. I have got a lot of wisdom from transgenders who have diligently handed me down a lot of wisdom, to navigate workspace, to navigate my college environment, what to do, what not to do. And then I have used my own wisdom as well. तो वो जो सपोर्ट मिल रहा है वो ले लीजिए, और बॉडी को अच्छा रखना है, क्योंकि अगर अच्छा हेल्दी बॉडी रहेगा तो वो अच्छा हेल्दी बॉडी अच्छे से ट्रांजिशन कर पाएगा. And I also forgot, just highlighting once, the need for healthy diet, eating healthy, including physical activity within your routine, whatever activity interests you. Often the activity can be something that you even find affirming. I think for a lot of trans men, sports, rough sports can be affirming. They can play that. And for a lot of trans women, going for Zumba, dancing, all of this can be affirming. And you know how ये affirmation का विजन अगर आप रखें कि क्या मुझे affirm करता है, उसके साथ अगर आप activities को जोड़ें, तो I think they become personally meaningful and purposeful to you. And then even to have them in your life feels good.
I agree. Engaging in some sort of activity, that really affirms you. I absolutely agree. It does, build up a lot of character, builds up a lot of confidence. So yeah, absolutely. So the next question that we've got is, it's related more to, again, coming back to mental and emotional well-being. So the question that we've got goes, how can I create and maintain boundaries to protect my mental and emotional well-being as a trans person?
Yeah, so boundaries का तो ऐसा है कि boundaries establish करना भी एक skill है. जो प्रैक्टिस के साथ वी हैव टू इनकलकेट विद इन आवरसेल्व्स, क्योंकि बाउंड्रीज एस्टैब्लिश करना, जैसे मैं बोल रही थी, इज नॉट सेकेंड नेचर टू अस इन आवर कल्चरल कॉन्टेक्स्ट। लेकिन एक इम्पॉर्टेंट चीज है कि ना बोलना, जब मैं कंफर्टेबल नहीं हूँ इससे, उससे ना बोलना बहुत ज़रूरी है, या फिर ये कन्वे करना कि आई एम नॉट कंफर्टेबल। उसमें ऐसा नहीं है कि द अदर पर्सन ऑटोमेटिकली विल चेंज, क्योंकि उसका होना मुझ पे नहीं है। लेकिन आई डिड दैट फॉर माई सेल्फ, आई शोड अप फॉर माई सेल्फ बाई क्रिएटिंग दिस बाउंड्री दैट आई एम नॉट कंफर्टेबल विद दिस। And if that boundary is violated, I can also further choose on whether I want to continue contact with this person or not. तो ये एक इम्पॉर्टेंट बात है। ऑफन डिफिकल्ट कन्वर्सेशंस में हम एक्यूजेटरी हो जाते हैं कि आपने ये मेरे साथ किया है, आपने ऐसा किया है, वैसा किया है। उसमें क्या होता है, दूसरा पर्सन के पास बहुत पावर चला जाता है, एंड वो दैट पर्सन थिंक्स दैट दे हैव अ लॉट ऑफ कंट्रोल ओवर अस, कि दे विल टेक अ सर्टेन एक्शन एंड द पर्सन विल be dancing along their actions emotionally. तो इसमें ये इम्पोर्टेंट है बोलना, खुद का अकाउंटेबिलिटी लेके बोलना कि आई फील दिस वे, I feel this way by your actions, and this is what I would like from your end. तो ये बोलना है किससे अनकंफर्टेबल होते हैं आप, और ये भी बोलना है क्या आप अप्रिशिएट करते हैं, क्योंकि हर समय ऐसा भी होता है कि जो कर रहा है उसको भी शायद नहीं पता, क्योंकि ये कोई मॉडल नहीं है। अभी भी अगर मैं बोलूँ कि एक पेरेंट के लिए भी ट्रांसजेंडर चाइल्ड को कैसे अपब्रिंगिंग करना है, उसका मॉडल नहीं है सोसाइटी में, इतना रोल मॉडल्स नहीं है। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि उनका भी शायद ऐसा है कि वो रोश में हेट में ही कर रहे हैं, वो नहीं जानते कुछ लोग। तो शायद वो भी कम्युनिकेट करना कि क्या आपको अच्छा लगता है। ऑफन क्या हो जाता है कि रेज में हम बुराई बोल देते हैं, लेकिन क्या अच्छा लगता है, क्या करना है, ये बोलते नहीं है। तो इसलिए द अदर पर्सन ऑल्सो डजंट नो कि क्या करके द पर्सन कैन मेक यू फील गुड, सो टू कम्युनिकेट दैट। और एक चीज़ है कि जब हम बहुत डिस्ट्रेस्ड है किसी भी कॉन्वर्सेशन, किसी भी मोमेंट में, टू ऑलवेज रिमेंबर दैट इट इज़ ओके टू टेक अ ब्रेक फॉर योर सेल्फ, काम डाउन एंड रिटर्न टू द सिचुएशन। तो वहाँ एक्टिवली प्रैक्टिस करना कि अभी आई एम नॉट इन द स्टेट, आई विल गेट बैक टू दिस लेटर। आई थिंक दिस एक्ट इन इट सेल्फ diffuses the tension. It helps you, with some space to think what you want to do, and then come back to the situation and address it. So these are some of the things that immediately came to my mind. We also talk about a broken record technique. तो उसमें ऐसा है कि जब कोई आपके साथ बहुत डिनाई कर रहा है या कन्फ्रंटेशनल हो रहा है, तो कन्फ्रंट नहीं करना है, काम टोन में what you want you keep repeating, and you don't repeat even while accepting the point of the person ki, okay, this is your viewpoint, but I want this is how I feel comfortable. And अगर ऐसा है कि दोनों में negotiation नहीं हुआ, तो it can stay as that. We have to also learn to agree to disagree, क्योंकि हर समय ऐसा नहीं होएगा कि the whole world will be in agreement with me. So this desire to validate all of our responses and reactions from everyone, that also becomes counterproductive often. So to draw that line, I think, becomes essential. Certain points कि ये आपका नज़रिया है and ये मेरा नज़रिया है, they do not clash, and this is where we keep it. I'm not going to overextend myself to explain myself to you. I have made my point, and this is the boundary that I draw. लेकिन इसमें भी ऐसा है कि वायलेंस आ जाता है केसेस में, एंड वायलेंस में मैं एक ही बात बोलूँगी कि एक्टिवली आप सपोर्ट सीख कीजिए क्राइसिस इंटरवेंशन सेंटर्स या फिर CBOs से, क्योंकि अभी दैट इज़ द प्रोमिनेंट लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस दैट आई कैन थिंक ऑफ, because these networks are connected with lawyers, they are connected with the police, they have prior experience of dealing in crisis intervention cases, and I think it is very important for us to collate nationally. लेकिन ये भी होता है कि ज़्यादा रिसोर्सेज अगर हम अवेलेबल कर दें ना, तो जो हेटर्स भी है उसके पास भी रिसोर्सेज चला जाता है, और वो भी काउंटर स्ट्रैटेजाइजिंग कर सकते हैं। तो उसमें भी हमको सोचना है कि कैसे वो रिसोर्सेज का कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी मेंटेन करना है, कैसे ये इंश्योर करना है कि कम्युनिटी में ही रहे right? And then to think about these things and strategize.
Those are some really good points. I absolutely agree. Yes. So now the next question that we've got, Aritra, is it's quite an interesting one actually. So far we've been talking about steps to make peace in emotional terms and mental wellness terms, and also to deal with your dysphoria better. So the next question that I've got for you goes, in what ways can I integrate creative expression or art therapy into my healing journey as a transgender individual?
Yeah, so one thing that I would want to clarify is that creative expression and art therapy are not synonymous, because art therapy is a professional practice that people get trained in, and therefore it might not be possible for us as untrained naive individuals to do art therapy on ourselves. So if you specifically want to do art therapy, I think you should go to a professional and do that therapy under guided supervision. मगर अगर ये बात है कि कैसे क्रिएटिविटी में डिस्ट्रेस को एक्सप्रेस करना है, तो क्रिएटिविटी इज़ अ वेरी गुड मीडियम, जो मैं बोल भी रही थी कि बिकॉज ये ऐसा होता है कि जब हम डिस्ट्रेस का एक आउटलेट ऐसा करते हैं जो क्रिएटिव है, we also end up creating something that is larger than us, larger than life of it. It might be in the form of poetry, it might be in the form of drawing, it might be in the form of singing, dancing. And always remember that it is not about how well you do it, how perfectly you do it, whether you end up becoming Picasso or Madonna or Rekha. It is about giving expression to your own self. किसी को एग्जीबिशन में डिस्प्ले नहीं करना है, किसी को दिखाना नहीं है, खुद के लिए करना है, खुद को सोलेस मिलके इसके लिए करना है, और माइंडफुली करना है. जब करना है तो फोन इस तरह क्रिएटिव एक्सप्रेशन एक तरह ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. कुछ समय स्क्रीन से अलग, उसमें ही बूट करके रहना और उसके साथ रहना, उसके इमोशंस को फील करना, पेंटिंग में, डांसिंग में, मूवमेंट में, कहीं पर सिंगिंग में, जो भी आपका क्रिएटिव मीडियम उसमें उसमें माइंडफुली खुद को इन्वॉल्व करना है. I think, and that is a great way, because that also once again gives space from the distance. In that way, I'm not constantly talking about my trauma. Often verbal mediums become tiring because वर्बल मीडिया में हम बात करते हैं, हमारा प्राइमरी एक्सचेंज वर्बल मीडिया में ही होता है, इसलिए दैट बिकम्स टायरिंग, राइट? सो इफ आई कुड एनैक्ट माई ट्रॉमा, जैसे साइको ड्रामा में होता है कि आप इनैक्ट करके दिखाओ और उसमें जो इमोशंस आते हैं आपको वो सिचुएशन इनैक्ट करने में, या फिर आप एक डांस रिसाइटल ऐसे करते हो जहाँ पर शायद ऐसा है कि कोई अब्यूज सर्वाइवर अब्यूज के ऊपर जाता है, खुद को एम्पावर करता है, देन थ्रू दैट एक्सप्रेशन that sense of relief comes. There's a really nice program and they run across the world called the Theatre of the Oppressed, and they sort of use theatrical techniques from theater and psychodrama to facilitate this, standing up for yourself, standing up for community. And I think, the more organizations know about this, they can probably arrange for such workshops from professionals, and then they can facilitate that. लेकिन खुद के अगर expressions के बारे में सोचे तो it is important to understand your medium, which is your medium of creativity, and to have that medium on a weekly or daily basis in your life, at least on a weekly basis during the weekends, because many of us are also tied down with work during the week, academic demands. So making some time for it in your day, and उसमें catharsis होता है, emotions निकल आते हैं. बहुत लोगों के लिए emotions verbalize करना एक struggle है. तब अगर आप ये सोचे कि if I want to describe my relationship to this emotion with a song, what will that song be? What will that color be? उससे एक पिक्चर पेंट करना, इस इमोशन को अगर एक फॉर्म देना है, कैसे मैं इसको पोर्ट्रे करूंगी आर्ट में, ऐसे भी सोच सकते हैं कुछ कुछ. लेकिन आई वुड से गाइडेड प्रोसेस. बहुत ये ऐसा नहीं होएगा कि आप सुन लिया ये टॉक और कल बहुत हो गया ऐसे. इंटरनेट में भी रिसोर्सेज है सेल्फ हेल्प का. Art therapy, I think, is best in the form of workshops, but regularly connecting with art and creativity, I think, is a good means of coping in general.
That is really sage advice, because I, as a creative person, also have a lot of difficulty being able to translate my emotions, or even in general, I'm a person that has a lot of difficulty expressing myself. So yeah, absolutely, what you're saying resonates a lot with me personally. So yes. uh
That it
the
does.
Thank you very much. So, the next question that I've got for you is, can you share any information on the latest research or therapeutic interventions tailored to supporting transgender individuals in overcoming trauma?
या सो आई थिंक इसमें ऐसा है कि जो थेरेपी टेक्निक्स है वो टेक्निक्स आर यूजफुल टू मेंटल हेल्थ कॉन्टेक्स्ट. और मेंटल हेल्थ कंडीशंस जो है, आप डिप्रेशन बोलो, एंजाइटी बोलो, सोशल एंजाइटी बोलो, ये तो इसका जो सिम्टम्स मैनिफेस्टेशंस है ये क्वाइट सिमिलर ही है अक्रॉस द पॉपुलेशन. तो इसके लिए टेलर्ड जो थेरेपीज है वो ट्रांस इंडिविजुअल्स के लिए भी इफेक्टिव है. इसका स्टडीज है. जैसे कि आप समझो कॉग्निटिव बिहेवियर थेरेपी, CBT, is very good for depression, anxiety, stress related conditions, adjustment related problems. अभी dialectical behavior therapy भी है, DBT, which is good for like difficult emotions, distress, and उसको रेगुलेट करना, effectively relationships में participate करना उसमें है. एक है एक्सेप्टेंस एंड कमिटमेंट थेरेपी, जो वैल्यू बेस्ड थेरेपी है कि आप किस वैल्यूज में बिलीव करते हो, आपका वैल्यूज क्या है और कैसे वो वैल्यूज को प्रैक्टिस करना है लाइफ में ताकि योर लाइफ हैज मीनिंग एंड पर्पस. So these are, like mostly evidence-based interventions अभी जो latest है, जो market में are given and delivered. But I think in these interventions, literature is coming up on how to make them trans-affirmative or trans-sensitive. और उसमें a lot of focus is on the trans context. And this context is in the social context. This context is particularly in the form of minority stress. मेयर का एक थ्योरी भी है माइनॉरिटी स्ट्रेस का, यहाँ पर ये बोला जा रहा है कि जो मैं बोली भी कि ट्रॉमा कॉम्प्लेक्स है इस कम्युनिटी के लिए, क्रॉनिक है. तो क्रॉनिक कॉम्प्लेक्स और सिस्टमिक भी है कि ऐसा बहुत फैक्टर्स हैं विच आर नॉट इन माई कंट्रोल. सो टू कॉन्टेक्चुअलाइज दैट व्हेन यू आर गिविंग एडवाइस, कि आप ऐसा कुछ एडवाइस दे दिया कि फ्री विल में आप ये कर लो, वो कर लो, ये कर लो, वो कर लो बोल दिया, लेकिन the person is constrained. For instance, even coming out for a trans individual in a country that punishes you with death sentence for transgender identity cannot be a therapeutic solution. You have to tailor your solution to the individual context. और इसलिए ऐसा है कि आपको खुद का कल्चर समझना है थेरेपिस्ट को. और ये मैं थेरेपिस्ट या प्रोफेशनल्स के लिए बोल रही हूँ कि वहाँ पर क्या लॉज है, क्योंकि ये अगर आप इस डोमेन में काम करते हो तो सिर्फ बुक नॉलेज इज नॉट इनफ. कम्युनिटी के क्या प्रेशर्स है, लॉज है, का जो यूनिक कॉन्टेक्स्ट वो आपको समझना है, उनसे आपको वन टू वन डायलॉग करना है और रिच इमर्सिव नैरेटिव, उनका जो लिव्ड एक्सपीरियंस है उसको एक्सेस करना है, विच कैन इन्फॉर्म योर थेरेपी. सो ये हो रहा है, but literature is very new. It's merely coming up in the West, and I would be very sad to say that in the Indian context, it is really out of line with the thinking. Magar, I would still flag कि Mariwala Health Initiative had recently brought out their, whole book, Queer Affirmative Counseling Practice. उसमें क्या lens है, in these different forms of therapeutic approaches these they have discussed. There's this trans-affirmative mental health care study which was recently published. उसमें professionals का competencies में क्या कमी है, these are being discussed. So research is happening. लेकिन good thing for professionals to keep in mind is जो कोई new technique invent नहीं करना है. जो techniques है they are good techniques, मगर context को देखना है और उसमें techniques को apply करना है. जैसे मैं बोल रही थी माइंडफुलनेस एंड ग्राउंडिंग वेरी गुड टेक्निक्स, लेकिन उसमें अगर अफर्मेशन का एलिमेंट ना हो तो दैट मिसेस द ट्रांस कॉन्टेक्स्ट। इसलिए मैं अफर्मेशन और माइंडफुलनेस को जोड़ी। ये खुद का क्रिएटिविटी से आया because of my own lived experience and my experience of talking and working. And this has not come in a day. I think, like this year, I'll complete almost 10 years of my being associated with this community. So it has been a long, long time. And like I said, I still learn. So this know-it-all approach that we carry as professionals, that, we know everything and we do not need to learn, I think that's a very, very for vapid approach. It's going to fall through when you are working with populations that are diverse and that have unique needs. So it's very important to stay rooted to those realities while offering interventions.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. We actually have a very similar question in regards to that. So, can you also recommend more literature or documentaries or other resources that explore the diverse experiences of transgender individuals? So, in both in terms of like trauma and resilience.
Yeah. So once again, this is something that I personally feel sad about. कि mainstream जो media है, उसमें positive representations are horrible. They're almost nil to absent. I think there are some forms of representation in this recent, web series that came out where Shushmita Sen acted, I think Tali. But once again, I think there are few lines in that documentary which are sort of misleading, which talks about stuff like fake trans and real trans. So the thing is, the content is being made by cishet producers, and most of them have no idea of the realities of the community. They're casting cis men as trans women, and that's horrible because it establishes and reinforces the stereotype that trans women are men who are dressed in women's clothes, and trans men का तो कोई imagination ही नहीं है, तो उसमें कोई representation भी नहीं है. But I would not like to leave at this. I think there are queer film festivals which happen in every city. तो आप उसमें जाइए, वहाँ पर जो documentaries है वो आप देखिए. मैं कैलकाटा की बात कर सकती हूँ, तो यहाँ पर two film festivals, the Dialogues Film Festival, which happens exclusively catered to the LGBTQ community. It's like a 3 days immersive affair of only documentaries and films that, like cater to queer trans contexts. And साउथ एशिया का भी वो लोग प्रायोरिटाइज करते हैं ताकि लोकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट का बना रहे. जैसे एक फिल्म था जॉयलैंड, अगर आपने देखा हो, it explores the relationship, multiple relationships of, how patriarchy invades into the family structure, how probably cis man protagonist in the film explores this relationship with his wife and the trans woman, and like how the nuances of that relationship, right? And it so happens that later the trans woman realizes that she cannot be with this guy, and what I like about this film that she chooses herself, and she does not become this sorry figure whom you can pity with, but neither do they stay together, but she chooses herself and she stays resilient in whatever she has been doing and keeps pursuing it. That is the note on which the film ends. So I think that is a really nice, and I think कुछ देर पहले जैसे कि वो एक आया मेहर, Trinetra played that character. I am forgetting the name of the series. I think
it was Made in Heaven.
yeah, sorry, Made in Heaven का जो season 2 है, तो उसमें भी, मगर I feel bad that like I have to literally nitpick these documentaries and stuff, and also I wonder about access when I talk about these things, and also the kind of problems, क्योंकि Made in Heaven का जो setup है कि that trans woman is a wedding planner, and that is inaccessible to a lot of trans women, and trans men के लिए तो छोड़ ही दो, trans men का representation ही नहीं है. लेकिन कुछ दिन पहले I saw like Amazon Prime, I think, is kind of releasing this Untold Love Stories, which features a couple from Bengal whom I know personally. That they're a trans couple, a trans man and a trans woman who got married legally, and it shows their love story. So I think these narratives need to be created more, and I think that we need to take this up more. Some days ago, I was working with a project where I was working on my narratives of getting trained in a curriculum that was not trans sensitive. I think so. We are also releasing a short film on that note, and once it is released, maybe I think I can take it to places and actually talk about certain workplace discrimination and stuff. तो अब लेकिन जब मैं बोल रही हूँ वही मुझे लगता है कि कॉन्टेक्स्ट सेंसिटिव कितना है ये एक फिल्म मैंने देखी थी एक तारा कलेक्टिव की एक जगह अपनी तो उसमें ना तो ट्रांसवुमन फ्रॉम द ग्रास रूट्स हाउ दे फाइंड रेंटेड एकोमोडेशन ये प्रॉब्लम दे हैव फोकस्ड एंड आई थिंक इट्स ब्यूटिफुल बिकॉज इट रियली शोज द कास्ट क्लास एंड जो जेंडर का इंटरसेक्शन है और उसमें कैसे डील होता है देबोलिना नाम का एक फिल्म मेकर है जो जिनका एक फिल्म डायलॉग्स में दिखाई गई थी on the lives of two trans men. One is younger, still exploring, and one is senior to him, and how they both inform their transness. And this younger trans man's parents are supportive. They talk about their own journeys of coming to terms with his transness. It is called, I think, Porshi Niler Arshinagor or something like that. And it is also traveling India as a film. So I think, getting connected and seeing these festivals. But once again, I think that is a privilege in itself for many queer individuals. Yeah. And resource के तरीके से, I think a lot of work has happened even within the context of HIV prevention, targeted primarily at AMAB individuals, but there are resources, local resources by organizations. So आप अगर आप connected रहेंगे तो उनसे भी आप resources collect कर सकते हैं. जैसे कि I am also recommending Transgender India, like I'm saying, that they have collated resources in themselves. Then AFAB individuals, I keep saying about Sappho for Equality in Kolkata, which is like one of the oldest organizations that keep working with bisexual, lesbian, women and trans men, and they exclusively had that focus. Now they have expanded it to include queer persons who are systemically marginalized because they think that is a wider scope to which they can warm up to. But even knowing that I have such an organization in my city makes me feel so nice. And I think there's this Bengal trans men group also, which we have in Bengal. So, different diverse groups, and the more narratives we come out with, the more narratives we put out, the more we write about our experiences. Some of us who have the privilege to write about it, if you write about it in popular media, I think that way you also create narratives, you also create instances from which people can learn and, resonate with.
Right. Uh, Wonderful. Previously, while we were speaking previously, we had also talked a bit about, family and, reaching out to family, how even, speaking with your family can be very, it definitely is a daunting experience, right? So the question that I have for you next is, what role does family therapy play in addressing the impact of my transgender identity on family dynamics and relationships, and how can me and my family work together to foster understanding?
Mhm. Yeah, so one thing that I would like to flag in this question is that family therapy necessitates that the family is willing to work with you in your trans journey. So that is a prerequisite. If we have got a family that is not willing, you cannot force a family into therapy. Because often that is our contention, that if we bring them to therapy, will therapy work? But you cannot have unwilling individuals in therapy. And I think often our frustration comes from the fact that क्यों नहीं समझ रहे हैं, and I want to coerce them to accept. लेकिन वो भी है जो मैं पहले बोली कि I take that power away from them. And why I'm saying this, because in many cases the family is absent, the family is not there, or even if it is not there to show up in an effective way to be present for the person. So if you have a family that wants to go to therapy with you and learn, I think you already have an environment that is in your favor, and then that shouldn't be as difficult when a professional takes care of it. But otherwise, I think what is more standing out to me in this question is the fact that if I can, somehow take my family to therapy, will they accept my transness? I don't think that works in this way. Yeah, I'm sorry to call a spade, but that is how it is.
No, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, willingness has
Yeah.
to be there, because obviously you cannot coerce anyone into anything, right? So yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe to sit with that discomfort then, that they're not going to come around. But like there's this song by I think Adrienne recently which says yes and so which sort of acknowledges, yes, this problem is there, and then not saying but and what can I do? So yes, my family is not willing to go into therapy, and yes, this discomfort is there, and question mark, and what can I do therefore? And I think there we learn ways to show up for ourselves, or to also think how we can alternatively create familial structures, kinship networks, and build something that is sustainable outside the dominant imaginations of family.
Right. So let's kind of shift this conversation a little bit towards more to do with relationships. I think one thing that most queer and trans people do end up, especially I feel like trans women are kind of more likely to end up in situations like these, especially toxic relationships, right? Where perhaps their cis partners want to keep them a secret. Or of course a lot of troubles do arise from of that, because there's a lot of shame for cis men to definitely tell the world that I'm with a trans person, or I'm with a trans woman, right? So I think this question that we've got right here might help give a little bit of clarity to people that are in toxic relationships. So the question is, how to deal with a toxic relationship as a transgender person, and what if I'm in love with my partner and I'm afraid that if I leave them, nobody else would love me?
Yeah. So I think I would hold on to that thought that what if I leave them, nobody would love me. So I think here we are imagining an outcome, right? And often when we imagine outcomes, our brains, because they are the self protective mechanisms that they try to come up with the worst possible outcome, right? And I think of a worst case scenario that nobody will love me. Now, when I look at love once again, from a queer trans perspective, and I think because a queer lens is also about questioning how we look at things. So when we look at love, do we only look at love which is provided by a partner in a cishet manner? Or do we also look at the kind of love that our communities provide to us, our friends provide to us, that may not be exactly the cishet partner kind of love, but is also love, right? So to question that once, and then to go back to nobody loves me. Is it true with all of this evidence that there is nobody in my life that loves me, or is it true that I'm afraid of finding a partner? And if I'm afraid of finding a partner, then to also look at the situation in this manner, that I'm living in a social context where my identity is tabooed and stigmatized to a great extent. And therefore, for that partner to come forward and be with me, it's also a social challenge for that partner, especially if that partner is cis het with a dominant imagination of a cis het life. Now, it is not in my control what steps that partner will take to make our relationship survive. But it is in my control to accept respectful behavior and to say a no to toxic behavior like the one that you just described, where I am kept a secret all along in the relationship. Now, if a person wants to sign up for it, I'm all for self determination and agency. So I would not go to that person saying that, you do not, because I also understand that all of us need love. All of us need romantic sexual love. And in a desert, a cacti will try to hold on to whatever it gets. I think that's the closest metaphor that I could get to it. And I do not demonize, pathologize, you know, pour sympathies on that situation because it is what it is. But then through that act, am I showing up enough for myself? Or am I telling that, itna se hi I can be loved. If you just throw this one morsel at me, one drop at me, this is enough. So to reflect on that, and do I not think if I deserve more? So these are some of the thoughts. And like I said, since the context is difficult, I cannot, provide a holistic solution like that. I cannot say that, a lot of cishet men will suddenly start marrying trans women and the situation will become all lovey-dovey and flowery. I cannot say that. But there are marriages happening between cishet men and trans women. There are marriages happening between cishet women and trans men. There are marriages happening between trans individuals. I am kind of surprised and also quite saddened by the fact that trans people do not see possibilities for T40 relationships in India that much. They are often, most unkind to their own community people as potential partners. And I think a part of that also comes from internalized shame towards myself, where I see that securing a cis person as my partner is some sort of achievement. And if I do not do that, then, I am not having that place in society. And I think being assigned male at birth, while what you said that, trans women have this unique situation, I also feel that being assigned male at birth gives you a certain sort of privilege in the social system. And therefore, you are still in a position of desire where, cis men, nonetheless, they desire you, and almost in a fetishistic manner, because that is fed once again by pornography, by the heavy predominance of trans women in the sex work industry, not having enough employment opportunities. So that is there. But with regards to trans men, I think cis men do not regard their masculinity, and neither do cis women. So they are kind of stranded in a weird place. And even trans women are not very accepting towards trans men, and this I've seen. So I think that when it comes to trans men, then they have a host of barriers where their masculinity is questioned, the partnership is stranded. So I think we need to look into unique contexts, and I think the situation even becomes more difficult for non-binary individuals. This almost, I think, demands a separate live session where we can talk about relationships in, depth. But toxicity is not welcome. I think you are doing a disservice to yourself by accepting toxic behavior, by showing that you deserve it, right? By showing that you do not deserve better. So once again, if your friend faced the same kind of thing, what advice would you have given to that friend? Would you have said that friend to remain a dirty secret of the man, or would you have asked that friend to walk out? And why not extend that same compassion to yourself? And good people stay. Good people stay. People who are affirmative, they stay. People who are open-minded and willing to fight for you, they will stay. And I do not think that a lifetime relationship, if you're signing up for that, can be lived out in secrecy. You can, of course, live it out, but the perils of it, I think, are too emotionally draining for me. Once again, I cannot take this personal call for someone, but I would urge them to look at the pros and cons of it before, deciding the outcome.
Yes. Um, Absolutely. I mean, there is so much that you've said that I've genuinely resonated a lot with. But on the same line, I guess, on the same line of questioning, I would also like to know a little bit more about let's say a trans person, right, after they've had a breakup, right? So how would you suggest they start moving on and again begin to start loving your own self?
Yeah, so I think that when we talk about moving on, once again, we think of moving on as moving past, not moving through. I think it is very important, once again, that a breakup will bring up stages of grief. Because if that relationship meant so much to you, you will have emotional connectedness to it. And you will have to work through emotions which are uncomfortable. That is a journey. You will have anger, You will have sadness in bouts. You might even need help from outside, from your peers, from professionals to work through it. But the way at the end of the tunnel is through the tunnel. And therefore, I think once again, it's very important to carry on. Now, how to carry on, if you ask, I will go back to what I've been saying, to practice self compassion, to add things that you find meaning in, to spend more time with friends, to not isolate yourself, to write, to journal about it, to catharsize, not hold it all within. Because some days back I came across this beautiful quote. It said that the quote is by Buddha. I don't know whether Buddha actually said it, but it's like holding on to anger is like holding a burning coal. So you end up destroying yourself instead of, in the expectation that you will avenge the other person. And often that happens, that we hold on to resentment because we want to give it back to the other person, but in the process, we end up destroying ourselves. So, to also think how we can add glimmers to our life. So, glimmers are the opposite of triggers. They are moments of joy and nervous system euphoria highs, which we can add what makes us feel good, to feel connected, and to create boundaries with that ex. Not text them continually, not call them, if possible, block them, take some space, and genuinely reflect back on the relationship. I think all of this is very important. And once again, the individual solutions can come case by case. Often we also have our own part to play in the toxicity of the relationship, because it cannot be so that, like it was only a one way narrative. Often, how we function, whether we draw boundaries or not, whether we assert or not, that also plays into the interpersonal dynamics. And so to acknowledge that, to learn from it, and to also look at the relationship as a learning opportunity, right? To not look at it as a failure or success, but as a learning opportunity, and to see what worked well, because I'm sure the relationship also had certain good aspects to it. So therefore, they can be aspects which you can hold on to. And what were the great areas, what were the bad areas, what were the intolerable areas? If you reflect on that, I think it becomes much easier to set our own standards in case of relationships, what I'll accept, what I'll not accept. And of course, keep adding moments of joy. Physical activity is hugely beneficial. Sleeping is beneficial. Hugging people is beneficial. Cuddling with pets is beneficial. Spending time in nature is beneficial. Often, the very mundane activities give us joy, give a kick to our nervous system, help regulate arousal. So I think adding all of this helps really.
Absolutely. And I definitely think this, piece of advice that you are giving to all of us, honestly, I think it will help a vast amount of people, because, we as queer and trans individuals, we are, often too hard on ourselves, right? So, yeah, hearing all of these words coming from you, I think, it will definitely make a lot of change in the minds of, people that are, constantly in that loop that, no one will ever love me, and if this person leaves, there's nothing else, I'm gonna end up alone. So yes, absolutely, all of these, all of
And
this has.
even there, like you are saying, I should first, not should, but maybe realize that if we do not love ourselves, if we do not, model that love for ourselves, other people will not know only that
Yeah,
this is how we set the standard of loving. They will think that they can give us breadcrumbs and we will be satisfied with that. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so I agree. When you do engage in self-love, when you do engage in self empowerment, that is how you will be able to recognize what is toxic, what is good for you, what is not good for you. So the more you engage in all of these activities, I definitely think it'll definitely help a vast amount of people, regardless if they are queer or trans, honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah. Alrighty. So, shifting the, line of questioning to a slightly different level, I would like to ask, how can I navigate the process of legally and socially transitioning while managing the emotional challenges that may arise during these changes?
Yeah, so once again, I would go back to what I said, small wins, celebrate that, and to sort of see them in perspective that they add up to each other. Rome was not built in a day, and a transition is also not built in a day. It is about several moments across the lifetime. It is even not complete like people believe with, just completing the surgeries. It is a lifelong process because we evolve as human beings, our relationship with our bodies evolve, our ways of looking at ourselves that also evolves. And socially and medically, I think it is very important to essentially see that you have a circle of support all along. People who are your confidant, trusted people who will can resort to, come round to, क्योंकि ऐसा होता है कि मेरे पास सपोर्ट सिस्टम नहीं है एंड देन इट्स अ लोन बैटल एंड वो बहुत डिफिकल्ट होता है तो ये इंश्योर करना कि आई हैव रिसोर्सेज टू गो इनटू एंड ये भी हेल्प करता है कि अगर आई एम कनेक्टेड विद फेलो पीपल हु आर ऑल्सो ऑन दिस जर्नी उनके विंस भी खुद को खुशी देती है कि उसने ये करवा लिया आई फील गुड एंड आई हैव दिस विजन कि अगर वो कर सकता है तो मैं भी कर सकती हूँ मैं भी कर सकता हूँ एंड लाइक दैट ऑफन ऐसा होता है कि मेरे पेरेंट्स एक्सेप्टिंग नहीं है लेकिन फ्रेंड के पेरेंट्स एक्सेप्टिंग है तो उसके हाउस में टाइम बिताना उन पे like to seek their support because often this I've seen like parents who are affirmative they also become like trusted and nice people for other trans people maybe there's this one parent who's affirmative and then all like people flock to that parent and I think that also helps so support I think is very essential being kind to yourself is essential acknowledging that progress often is not perfect but it is more about incremental steps that you take acknowledging that all the systemic barriers are not in your control so when you're like you will be facing probably procedural bureaucratic delays so to sign up for that even when you are legally transitioning and to know where exactly to go, what to do, because there are people to help you out. Often doing it all alone creates further burden. So to involve as many people as you can so that there's a diffusion of responsibility and not all of it comes onto you. I think these are some important things to keep in mind. And even in social transitioning, I've seen that people often set this unrealistic goal of someone whom they have seen on screen and they're completely transitioned, and therefore that is my goal from day one. It doesn't happen that way. So it can happen through small steps, like for a trans woman, it can be through slowly growing their hair, and you have to be patient with it for a trans man, it can be shedding off their hair. And this relationship that we have with hair is very interesting. In fact, it stands out to me as very interesting. And, bringing slow changes in your gender expression to, because you need to understand that you are not this lone individual existing in your own island. You're also existing in a social context and how people are warming up to your transition, whether you have your safety ensured is very necessary because often this has also happened that people there's this question of passing, how well you pass or not, because often unless you integrate yourself seamlessly, and I read that as also you erase yourself seamlessly and you appear very cis, that people are not tolerant of you, and that is a reality. So if some person feels that socially transitioning में उनको मास्क पहनना है उससे कंफर्ट होता है किसी किसी स्पेसेस में यू नो बेस्ट कि अगर मेट्रो में मास्क पहन के कंफर्ट होता है एंड आई नेविगेट दैट वेल इन मास्क take the mask with you. It's okay. I think we have to understand these contexts and navigate accordingly and not, like form a stereotype notion कि मास्क से खुद का फेस डिस्क्लोज नहीं कर रहा है ऐसा है तो इसके लिए जस्ट कट ऑफ कर दे ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए
So, people, I hope this session is quite informative so far. Aritra has been more than happy to tell so many things, about transitioning, about finding support systems, about finding that empowerment within yourself. I hope we all are learning a lot of new things and a lot of things to reflect upon. So I hope everyone is enjoying this session. So we are getting towards the end of our interview. So why don't we go over the last few couple of questions. Yeah. So the next question that I've got for you has more to do with medical and hormonal therapy, right? So the question that I've got is, can you provide any information on the impact of hormonal therapy on mental health, and also strategies for managing emotional changes during the transition process? Now, I'm a pretty transparent, so I honestly don't really have that much information, upon how really that change really happens. So I would be really happy to know more about this.
Yeah. So, say if I look at a body with a certain proportion of hormones, when you're trying to, first let us understand that the bodies as we conventionally understand, male and female, all of them have testosterone and estrogen within them. This idea that testosterone is only present in males and estrogen only in females is a misconception. It's a myth. Now, what usually happens in hormone therapy is to topple that balance more in favor of the desired gender, by which I mean the desired sex also in this case, because we are working at the medical and hormonal level. And that is the conception that we usually go by according to current consensus. तो उसमें ऐसा है कि आपका अगर आप मेल असाइंड हो तो आपका हार्मोनल प्रोपोर्शन फीमेल की तरह टिल्ट हो रहा है with more estrogen and progesterone often testosterone का प्रोडक्शन को ब्लॉक करके. और अगर आप फीमेल असाइंड एट बर्थ हो तो आपका टेस्टोस्टेरोन डोमिनेंट बॉडी ऐसा हो रहा है. तो ऐसा हो रहा है ये क्रॉसओवर जो है. इसमें जब सिस्टम में हॉर्मोन्स आते हैं नया नया और प्रोपोर्शंस का डिफरेंस होता है तो उसमें इमोशनल चेंजेस रहेगा क्योंकि हॉर्मोन्स आर वेरी इनेटली कनेक्टेड टू आवर इमोशनल स्टेट्स. So you will see that a lot of trans men say that when they are on testosterone, often they feel heightened arousal. There's a sense of aggression which they do not seem to be able to manage, which is very new to them. And some people have also reported, hypersexuality and not knowing what to do with that. And, so I think for that, I would say whenever there is arousal or distress, mindfulness and grounding, they help most of the times. Deep breathing helps a lot. Even self-soothing helps. And self-soothing is a new thing that I'm talking about here. So self-soothing is something that soothes your senses, any of your senses, because senses are very tied to emotions. It can be about having your favorite ice cream. It can be about feeling the rain. It can be about, connecting with a particular perfume and spraying it on your body and smelling it and then enjoying it. It can be small things. And I was talking about dialectical behavior therapy. So that therapy has a host of self-soothing self-help skills which are available on the internet, so you can access that. There is also distress tolerance skills, which is like when I'm very aroused, what do I do to, like regulate that arousal, to regulate that distress and think in a more clear headed manner. So I'm just going to talk about one technique which really helps, which is the stop technique, which says like literally S stands for stop, like you stop and pause on the moment. And then T stands for you take a break. So you take the break and you breathe into the moment. You notice your breathing and you anchor yourself in the moment. And then O is observe. You observe what exactly am I feeling in my body? Am I feeling ticklish in my belly? Am I getting the jitters? Is my heart racing? What is happening? What are the thoughts that I'm having? What are the feelings that I'm having? And then P says proceed mindfully. What action can I take now? What will be the consequences of this action? And how will those consequences favor or disfavor me? When we go into this process, our brains from a mode of autopilot, which is when we are in a limbic hijack, that happens when we are heavily emotionally aroused, we go into a state of calm and our frontal cortex, which sort of regulates our planning and executive functioning, kicks into process. And then that helps us to make more informed, calm, rational decisions. And we can again return back to the situation and deal with it in a more effective manner. So this is one. I think this also applies to trans women because when you're on estrogen, there's a lot of mood shift, and there and often I think a lot of trans people, because of dysphoria and pre-existing mental health conditions like anxiety and depression, which is very common within the community. So the hormones also interact with those mental health conditions. So ensure that you are regular with your meds. Ensure that you check in with the endocrinologist that whether with your psychiatric medications you can add hormones at all and at what doses, because these drugs interact and they are together going to inform your emotional state. So I think it's good to not look at transition as this process where you just jump in and do not educate yourself. It is very necessary to know what is happening. And while I say this, once again, I think this is not accessible to everyone. सबके लिए इतना जानना पॉसिबल नहीं है. तो ये हेल्थ केयर प्रोफेशनल्स पे भी डिपेंड करता है कि वो एडिक्वेटली एंगेज करे डायलॉग्स में कि इनका क्या साइड इफेक्ट्स हो सकता है, कैसे ये आपका साइकाट्रिक मेड से इंटरेक्ट कर सकता है, क्या एक्सपेक्टेशंस है, क्योंकि फर्टिलिटी इश्यूज आते हैं तो आप क्या करना चाहते हो उसके बारे में. डू यू वांट टू नॉट एट ऑल टेक अ बेबी और डू यू वांट टू, इफ सो हाउ यू कैन. तो इसमें हमारे देश में ये एक प्रॉब्लम है कि मेडिकल प्रोफेशनल्स के अंदर इतना हायरार्की है और एक डिसमिसिव एटीट्यूड भी है कि इनको क्या देखना है, सिर्फ प्रेस्क्रिप्शन दे दिया हो गया. So, to also rely on those bedside manners to inform the patient about, like what is going to happen, what to expect, what not to expect. Or I think even if it's not from the professionals, अगर organizational level पे भी आप करें कि local language में leaflets है कि क्या expect करना है, कैसे pool करके अगर एक resource बनाया जाए, तो I think that is also.
Yeah, that is a very interesting idea. Yeah, I mean, having, of course, सबको तो access, getting gender affirming care, of course, that is a privilege to be able to get that, because a lot of people, a majority of the transgender individuals in India are not in that financial,
Exactly.
situation.
And even if
Right.
they are often, like just मेरी friend ले रही है hormone, maybe
तो
ले
मैं
ली,
उसका
हाँ
प्रिस्क्रिप्शन
maybe
देके
ले
मैं
लिया,
भी,
हाँ
yeah.
लेकिन मेरा क्या levels है, मेरा blood sugar है या फिर diabetes है या फिर किसी deadly disease का propensity है, heredity में cancer है कि नहीं. I think all of these checking and do your regular blood work. This is something that I will keep emphasizing on. Do not do hormones without medical supervision. There are a lot of people who also go DIY. I do not want to present any stance on it in particular, but I would like to say that even if you do DIY, if you do not want to get into the healthcare, space and take advice from it, at least engage with friends who might have some medical knowledge, or anyone you can engage on Reddit. But be informed, be a part of a community that's doing DIY, and at least connect with that also. क्योंकि ये भी important है कि आप खुद के लिए कर लिए and you do not know. I'm not a very firm advocate of DIY because I think it has a host of challenges. But for some people, I think there are constraints for which they also choose DIY. क्योंकि बहुत gatekeeping होता है medical system में भी hormones को लेकर. So it's a complex situation.
जी. Right. Alrighty. So we are narrowing down to the last two questions of our interview. So the next question that I've got for you has more to do with the career side of a transgender individual's life. So are there like any specific vocational or career counseling resources that are available for transgender individuals, and how can one navigate workplace challenges related to their gender identity?
I think at this point, I'm feeling that I'm a standalone expert on anything that's trans. But I would say that even having specific professions is based on stereotypes, in the sense that it is expected that trans women will go into fashion, makeup, and stereotypically feminine sort of role, dancing. There are certain traditional occupations within the Hijra Koti community as well, through which traditional forms of livelihood. And I think in this conversation, that is also important because a lot of people do not have the resources to stay with their natal families and go for mainstream jobs. And while the workspace does not come up with mainstream jobs, I think these are sustaining mechanisms which should be respected and fostered so that people can at least survive. For trans men, also, like I think the stereotypical manly jobs, if I may call so, so they are also seen as. But then there comes this sniggering of cis men about their strength, and which then trying to babysit them into saying that you can't because I'm operating from a misogynistic and a trans negative mindset. So that is also there, I feel. But workplace challenges में ऐसा है कि workplace policies are not good everywhere. I think it's very important to stay connected with I would say, HR professionals whom you know are transformative in organizations because they can actually help you in certain ways, even in raising a complaint within the workforce, how to navigate that. They can provide you useful advice. I think some of the initiatives in the Indian context, like pride in workspace, like they are organizing this Rise Fair which is exclusively targeted at hiring for the LGBT community. There's this Trans Mala, which is happening in Delhi with the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. So I think a lot of these initiatives are also happening. So for people who are really looking for jobs, I think this might be good places to just tap into to see, to be connected in groups where there are advertisements for trans hiring, because I know Tata Steel and some corporates are really forward in actively hiring trans individuals to see that. And then to also know that no workplace is a perfect sanctuary. The workplaces ultimately have the same individuals who are conditioned by the same social biases, and how to strategize your existence within the workspace. When do you speak for yourself? What can be tolerated to a certain extent? What is out of your bounds to sort of have that dialogue within yourself? Because often what happens is, and that is the harsh reality, that without the finances flowing, survival becomes difficult. So to navigate your decisions in terms of pros and cons, and to see that the pros are in your favor, I think that is a good hack. But if you're facing discrimination, harassment, be sure to reach out to relevant sources, be it community people who can intervene in your workspace, be it other workspaces which can set a standard. I think here also comes the question of not all things being in our control. So workspaces also have to come forward to make it more inclusive for trans individuals. I feel that's a huge responsibility that rests on the Indian workforce sector at the moment. And I think that every workspace should have a dedicated mental health support space for trans individuals, because that is very important, and they should accept trans persons in leadership roles. It is not enough to give trans people assembly line jobs so that they're always left lingering at the base of the workforce and can never rise up, because that way you systematically exclude them from decision making and leadership. So to also ensure that trans people are in leadership position in workspaces and have more trans-led organizations, because I know for a fact that they can create more scope for employment, and they have been creating wherever they are in the country. If I talk about, organizations like the Aravani Art Collective, the Tweet Foundation, even Periphery, if I talk about, they are doing in their own capacity. No organization is perfect, but we need to have more organizations where, there's an active hiring process.
Absolutely. Right. So, on to the last question of our interview, Aritra. We also wanted to know more about how can one actively contribute to raising awareness and fostering understanding about transgender issues in my community, and what impact can advocacy have on my own healing journey?
The first thing that I want to mention in this case is that it is not mandatory always to also be an advocate, because we often feel that pressure that just because I'm from this community, I have to advocate. And I understand where this pressure comes from, because when there is so little representation, when, many of us are fighting lone battles in our like in our respective contexts. I understand that अर्ज मुझे समझ आती है कि कोई और नहीं है to make that better, and therefore I feel that responsibility. मगर उसमें भी, to take a deep breath and to just tell yourself that not everything is in my hands and I do not have to do it all alone is very important. क्योंकि one person cannot move a mountain. It is important to understand that, and to rope in support and work collectively as much as possible, क्योंकि उससे ही I think sustainable change आ सकता है. Lekin, of course, when you advocate for yourself, it can be through small things also. It can be confronting misgendering. It can be stating your preferred pronouns in your work meetings. It can be showing up for work in the clothes you feel comfortable in. It can be advocating for washroom access, and not for just a separate washroom, which I think has become the thing, that you just give them a separate washroom. And,
Right, like a
while that
gender
is
neutral
needed,
thing.
yeah, while that is needed, gender neutral washrooms are also needed. But there are some trans people who also feel comfortable in binary washrooms. And I think they must have the choice to access that. And especially, I think, talking about the architecture of washrooms once, and, saying how washrooms which are meant for cis men, the standing toilets that they have, it is not very convenient for trans men to access those standing stalls, and therefore to have more single chambers within the men's washroom also, to so that they can access it, in that privacy, and be in a relaxed manner. I think we deserve that. That is the bare minimum that all of us deserve. Basic relaxed sanitation. And because it has led to a widespread rise of UTIs in the community, and that's a real healthcare hazard that the community also struggles with, aside from the pile of other hazards we have got already. So I think it's very important to look into these demands, and these are not even demands. I think these should be more common sense by now, considering that there is enough visibility, there has been enough talk. Now that there needs to be action. So I think advocacy can come in these ways. Often, when you show up for your friends in violent contexts, that can reflect back on you also. So, like I was saying, holding your own hand, holding hands with others, and collectively and individually walking towards a better future, towards affirmation, towards healing, towards joy, self discovery, love, growth, potential, all of it.
Absolutely. Honestly, I've had a really wonderful time sitting down and having a word with you. How are you feeling?
I feel very good, but I also feel as if, I have done this exhaustive, almost like a
Quite
big
extensive, right?
session on. But I feel good to have done it, because I'm sure these are very genuine concerns, and I am very happy to address them in my capacity. This is probably what I'm doing on part of advocacy for my own well-being and for collective well-being as well.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty sure the folks that are watching, they have also gained a lot of insight, out of all the advice and all the thoughts that you have shared with us. Honestly, we are very happy, and we are grateful for all the work that you are doing. And, it is quite, it's quite empowering, and it's quite powerful, honestly, to be able to sit down and have a word with a person like you. So, Aritra, again, thank you very much for joining us today. And folks, if you want to learn more about transition, hormones, surgeries, etc., please don't forget to follow Transgender India for more information. And I will be seeing you in the next session. Till then, bye bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much, Arthur.